Good afternoon, Madam President and Senators. Senators, as you stand to make your contributions to the budget debate, each of you are national stewards with an assignment to be caretakers of our natural resources and our people. Proverbs 14:14 states, "For lack of guidance, a nation falls, but victory is won through many advisors." Ensure that you have a vision that covers all islands. Many are listening with bated breath to determine your policies, your contributions, and your decisions, and how they will impact their lives and the lives of others. Graham Brown stated, "Life is about choices. Some we regret, some we are proud of, some will haunt us forever." The message is simple. We are what we choose to be. End of quote. As you present and debate in the Senate, please note you are developing a legacy that will be a part of your history now and into the future. Remember that all your decisions will have far-reaching effects. Never be flippant or laissez-faire. Secondly, always see the complete picture. Do not cultivate an exclusive mindset that is limited and excludes others. You are here for all. There will be diversity in your presentations, even in the style of your Senate speeches. But I am sure of one thing, that each of you wants what is best for our Bahama land. Never react to everything that is said. Be willing to yield to allow another to present their perspective. Never descend to a low level to win an argument. Seek out wise counselors so that you will grow as a leader and as an individual. And finally, take time for God and seek His guidance daily. Proverbs 3:5-6 says this, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your path straight." Longfellow says, "Let us then be up and doing, with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing. Learn to labor and to wait." Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for our country, the Bahamas, for its people and those who have been assigned the task to lead. May each senator strive to present the best version of themselves, guided by your Holy Spirit. May their contributions be filled with the wisdom that is needed for this season in the life of our country. May harmony and collaboration guide them in their presentations. May they be sincere in their assigned task, and may their leadership and guidance be a blessing to all persons on their team and beyond. And Father, cover and preserve and protect their families. In the name of Jesus we pray. Please join in the prayer for our Lord. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good afternoon, senators and colleagues, and the members of the gallery. I'd like to welcome you to the June 23rd afternoon session of the Senate. Before the suspension on yesterday, we were debating a bill for an act for the appropriation of diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas on revenue account for the financial year commencing the 1st of July 2026 and ending the 30th of June 2027. And before our suspension, Senator the Honorable Barbara Cartwright was about to take the floor, but just before she does, the chair wishes to recognize a few persons who are with us today in the gallery, and I'd like to thank all of you for coming. It's been a while since we've had the gallery this full, and there are still some more who are waiting to come in. But firstly, I would like to recognize representatives from the Ministry of Social Services. As I call your name, I would like for you to please stand. Fedra Turnquest, Permanent Secretary. Thank you. Donette Williamson, Undersecretary. Gabrielle Roma, Assistant Director of Social Services. Shanique Davis, Head of Community Affairs Division. Dr. Anthony Hamilton, Chairman of the National Commission of Persons with Disabilities and President of Civil Society Bahamas. Dr. Deborah Bartlett, Strategic Media Consultant. Ms. Dawn Darling, Consultant on Homelessness. Whitney Williams, Administrative Cadet. Shami Austin Farrington, Director of Gender and Family Affairs. We should also have with us representatives from the domestic unit. ASP Kendra Williams. Corporal Terry Sands. No? I guess they're probably later. We also have the honor and the distinguished pleasure of having with us the one and only Her Excellency Ruby Ann Darling, Deputy to the Governor General. Along with her is Attorney Bertha Cooperusu, and my godchild Vero Cooper. Vero just recently graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Digital Analytics, or one of those very difficult fields. So congratulations to you, Vero. Very proud. God is very proud of you. Continue to do well. And I'm going to get in trouble, I know, but I have to mention two persons. We went through the fire and through the flood together, and it would really be remiss of me if I did not mention Miss Wanda Barnaby. She's from Disaster Management. Good to see you, Wanda, under pleasant circumstances. And also Miss Kim Gibson from the National Insurance Board. Is she here? Last but by no means least, the Bahamas Red Cross, of which we have two representatives here with us today. We have with us Ms. Kim Thurston, the first Vice President. Can you please stand, Kim? And then along with her is the Head of Operation, Ms. Exana Domius. Can you please stand? And actually, the two ladies from the Red Cross is the Senate's guest of honor today. And we feel very much a part of the Red Cross, the entire Senate body, and it would be remiss of us if we did not consistently recognize organizations such as the Red Cross. The Bahamas Red Cross offers a wide range of assistance to members of the community who suffer loss as a result of fire, hurricane, or other type of disasters. They also work as an auxiliary to the Bahamas government. In addition, the Bahamas Red Cross offers training and services in disaster management, first aid and CPR, lifeguard, Meals on Wheels, food parcels, backyard farming, youth programs, climate resilience, social welfare, and overall community service. It is for these reasons why the chair, and along with the entire Senate body, decided to make our first donation to the Bahamas Red Cross. And this is our official first bipartisan social outreach since we have been sworn in. So I just want to congratulate the senators for us coming together, despite the fact that we may be in the middle of a very robust, intense debate. We keep focused on the needs of the Bahamian people. And to all of you, I say congratulations, and I appreciate this bipartisan effort of us coming together to look out for the best for Bahamians. The Red Cross efforts assist individuals, families, communities, and this nation in a remarkable and outstanding manner. So without further ado, we're just going to get a quick suspension so that we can provide the Red Cross with a donation, and then we would resume the proceedings.
Madam President, I would formally move for the suspension of the business of the Senate for 10 minutes.
It's been moved and seconded that the business of the Senate stand suspended for 10 minutes. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. The business of the Senate stands suspended for 10 minutes. We're currently at second reading and committal of bills. As many? As many? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Barbara Cartwright. Senator Cartwright, you have the floor.
Madam President, I rise to make my contribution to the 2026-2027 budget debate as Minister of Social Services. As I do so, I am reminded of the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, and I quote, "Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there's injury, pardon. Where there's doubt, faith. Where there's despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy." End quote. These words remind me of the duty I have as Minister of Social Services to care with compassion for those who are suffering or experiencing challenges. For me, the Ministry of Social Services is not just another government agency. It is the conscience of our nation. It is the safety net that catches the fallen and the ladder that helps the ambitious to climb. This is the philosophy that will lead me, and by the grace of God, I will not fail. Madam President, before I proceed with my contribution, I wish to thank our Honorable Prime Minister for appointing me as Minister of Social Services and Senator. Having worked closely with the Honorable Philip Brave Davis for over 8 years, I can attest to his deep love for our country and compassion for the Bahamian people. Serving under his leadership has made accepting this offer to sit as a cabinet minister and senator an easy one. I hold no illusion about the difficulty of this task. I am deeply honored to be entrusted with it. To my mom, Agnes Cartwright, my daughter Taj, and my village, too many to name. Some are here in the gallery today, and to them I say thank you for your love and your support. I am truly grateful to all of you. I also want to congratulate you, Madam President, on your return to leading this chamber, and to our newly elected Vice President, Senator J.Ann Major, along with the other senators and my colleagues. Madam President, the Ministry of Social Services has rightly been described as the heartbeat of the nation. Its work reaches every corner of our archipelago. It touches the life of the Bahamian, from the cradle to the later years of life. It supports children, families, older persons, persons with disabilities, victims of abuse, persons facing hardship, and citizens who find themselves at the lowest and hardest point in their lives. I came to this ministry with my own understanding of its work. From my first day, that understanding has deepened. I was received with great warmth by the Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Fedra Ramming-Turnquest, the management team, and the entire staff at every level. To each of them, I extend my sincere thanks and gratitude. I also look forward to working hand in hand with State Minister of Social Services, the Honorable Barker's role, who will be instrumental in driving the government's agenda for this ministry. Madam President, I am not a social worker by profession, but all of my adult life, in every job I have held, and in every appointment undertaken, I have performed social work in some shape or form. Amen. That's right. I am a woman who cares deeply for people especially the poor, the vulnerable, and those who too often feel unseen. Poverty reduction is one of my central mandates. Poverty is never about money alone. It is the result of many negative factors one faces in their life. Some are forced, some unforced, some inherited. Whatever the genesis, poverty destroys institutions and it destroys relationships at every level between husband and wife, parent and child, friend and friend. When those bonds deteriorate, the consequences are dire. The strength of the Bahamian family determines the strength of this Bahamian society. That is why it is so important that we do all we can to lift families out of poverty. Our work will build on the progress gained over the past 5 years under the Davis-led administration. More citizens have been approved for health assistance. Support has reached more families in need. But, Madam President, the demand for shelter is on the rise. Shelter is now one of the clearest and most urgent needs facing the ministry. Providing access to affordable, safe, and secure shelters is one important way we can lift our people out of poverty. When our fellow citizens have no safe place to sleep, that is more than a housing issue. It is a social issue. It is a family issue. It is a child protection issue, and it begs our full attention. Madam President, for far too long, the narrative of social services has been one of handouts. With this budget, we are signaling a fundamental shift in our philosophy. Our goal is not merely to provide social assistance. It is to promote empowerment and human dignity. There is no dignity in permanent dependency. There is no pride in a system that keeps people trapped in a cycle of just enough to survive. The Ministry of Social Services should not just be a place where you go when you have failed or have a little challenge, but a place you go so that you may finally succeed. Madam President, the Ministry of Social Services addresses challenges that are often whispered in the shadows, but not confronted enough in the public. If we are to be a proactive ministry, we must be brave. We cannot inspire if we are not honest. We cannot heal what we refuse to name or discuss. We must speak of the non-payment of child support. We know the data, but more importantly, we know the stories. We see boys and young men wandering without a compass because the man who should have been their North Star walked away and did not look back, while the mother must apply to social services for food and shelter. We must speak painfully but clearly about the horrors that happen behind closed doors. We must speak about the incest and domestic trauma. In the deepest, darkest, our country has far too long been reactive, waiting for a report, waiting for a bruise, waiting for a tragedy. This must end. Madam President, we must speak of autism and neurodiversity. Families with autistic children have been struggling financially for too long in keeping up with therapy costs. Parents are looking for schools that see their children's brilliance instead of their disruptions. Autism must not be seen as a disability to be hidden, but as a different way that requires specific, aggressive support. We must speak loudly about the disabled who have aged out, but still relying on the government for support. And we must speak about mental health. Madam President, reports suggest that suicide is on the rise. We must come together as a community to identify warning signs for quicker intervention and support. In speaking on these issues, we must be proactive. There is much work to be done. It is cheaper to build a strong child than to fix a broken man. It is more humane to prevent a crisis than it is to manage one. Madam President, the 2026-2027 budget allocations for my ministry total $64,224,852. Adjusted for the removal of the Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas from the portfolio. The 2026-2027 allocation represents a 3.7% increase over that of last year. Budget Head 43, which underwrites expenses of the administrative arm, is $8,987,958. The allocation of the Department of Social Services has increased from $53,074,475 to $55,236,894, an increase of $2,162,419. Madam President, the Ministry of Social Services is a people's ministry, and although we provide a lot of monetary support to individuals, the heart of our operations is our staff. There is a total of just over 500 members of staff in our 26 locations, which spread across our nation. In this budget, $18.9 million has been allotted to cover personnel emoluments. This is a 12.6% increase over last year's figure of $16.8 million. Madam President, while we are grateful for this increase, as it reflects this administration's commitment to enhancing this ministry's ability to meet the mandate, we do recognize the fact that we are still somewhat deficient regarding our staff complement. Notwithstanding from what I have seen in my brief time at the ministry, the staff of the ministry and the Department of Social Services is extremely committed and dedicated to getting the job done. Many of them, the social workers, they go well beyond the call of duty to ensure that they meet the ever-increasing demands being placed on our ministry. Their job is not easy. It's certainly not glamorous. And oftentimes, the very people they seek to assist seem not to appreciate the work that they do. However, today, Madam President, I call on you and my colleagues in this honorable chamber to say thank you to the social workers and all the staff of the ministry and the Department of Social Services. These are unsung heroes who toil day in and day out. Behind the scenes, they improve the lives of the less fortunate brothers and sisters. For this, they deserve appreciation. Community Affairs. Madam President, the Community Affairs Division continued its Stronger Families promotion and has ably done so through targeted programs in the Carmichael, Pinewood, Nassau Village, and Fox Hill communities. They have not only addressed health matters in general, but they have created a safe space for women and men to better themselves. Our team, joined with our partners, have also used the center to mobilize our men to promote healthy relationships, mental health, and share parenting tips. Most notably is the division's ability to move to various communities with a backpack ready empowerment program designed and tested. We recognize that each community has its own nuances, and therefore the programs can be adjusted to meet the specific needs of each community. When I viewed the progress of this division, it exemplified true partnership, using the churches and facilitators and other partners who love what they do and share our goal of helping to build people. We recognize that everyone can positively impact a family unit and contribute to strengthening or transformation of their community. As one of the participants proclaimed, I am here to become a better me. I turn now to the National Commission of Persons with Disabilities. Madam President, the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities was established to protect the rights, promote responsibility, ensure accessibility, encourage inclusion, and advance equal opportunities for persons with disabilities. Recently, the Bahamas National Statistical Institute released its preliminary report on disability in the Bahamas. The 2022 census included 6 basic functional questions from the Washington Group, which set the parameters for comparative measurement on a global basis. The key findings from the report indicate that there are a total of 38,551 persons with disabilities age 5 and older. Madam President, when the 2022 disability figures are compared to those of the 2010 census, there is a significant increase in both the number and the percentage of disabled individuals 5 years and older. In 2010, there were 10,138 persons with disabilities, which represented 2.9% of the population at the time. In 2022, 38,551, or 10.3% of the population aged 5 years or older, are disabled. This means that over that 12-year period, the number of disabled individuals in the country has increased almost 4-fold. Based on this, my ministry will have to ensure that we make the requisite adjustments to provide more support to the disabled. Over the coming weeks, we will work with the Bahamas National Statistical Institute to better understand these figures to determine a disability profile. Having more detailed information will enable us to better strategize how we will target those who are most in need of our assistance. However, despite the large increase in the percentage of the disabled, based on the 2022 census, that percentage still pales in comparison to the World Health Organization's estimation that 15 to 16% of any population are persons with disabilities. We will continue to work with the BNSI and others to understand the scope of disability within our country. Madam President, I want to take this opportunity to assure those persons with disabilities who reside in the Family Islands that if you are in need of any assistance, we are able to send the required items to your island. Please reach out to the NCPD office or the Department of Social Services on your island, or do so by downloading the free mobile disability app, which is available in your Google or Apple App Store. During this fiscal year, we will continue with the successful Adults with Disabilities Day program and the review of Persons with Disabilities Equal Opportunities Act. Amendments will be considered. Further, our work continues to focus on inclusion and equal opportunity while maintaining the dignity of those we serve. Access to grant funding opportunities will continue to be explored and afforded to the community of persons with disabilities. Madam President, among the promises made in the last budget was the provision of a bus to transport persons with disabilities. The bus provided has been specially outfitted with a lift and provides adequate space for wheelchairs. That is progress. Madam President, this Davis-led administration is very concerned about the state of the elderly. We have taken note and we are perplexed by the growing numbers of abandoned seniors. As a result, Along with our colleagues in the health sector, we will work to address this issue and intend to bring the Care and Protection of Older Persons Bill of 2026 to this Parliament for consideration and passage. Madam President, the Ministry of Social Services has and will continue to provide direct financial support to reputable non-governmental organizations that provide support to the work of protecting and caring for our vulnerable in our society. To the extent possible, we provide them with generous subventions to aid in the delivery of quality service to their clientele. Indeed, Madam President, over the last few weeks, I have had the opportunity to visit several of the children's homes, and I can say that, based on what I saw, these homes do a fantastic job of providing quality care for their children. I am very impressed by what I saw and wish to express a special thank you to the administrators and the caregivers of the children's homes. Department of Gender and Family Affairs. I now turn my attention to this department. Madam President, as the Bahamas Principal Delegate of the Organization of American States Inter-American Commission of Women, I had the privilege of attending the 40th Assembly of Delegates, which convened in Washington, D.C. in May under the theme, Women's Economic Rights in the Americas, Policies and Strategies to Guarantee Autonomy and Bargaining Power. Countries were able to participate in discussions focused on closing gender gaps in the workplace, income and care economies, as well as promoting women's financial inclusion. The discussion had rich participation from member states across North, Central, and South America, as well as the Caribbean. I was honored to share my country's perspective in such a forum. Madam President, the Protection Against Violence Commission has been appointed, and the chairperson, Marissa Mason-Smith, and her vice chair, Pastor Dave Burrows, have been meeting consistently with their members. I note that some have expressed concern regarding a lack of funding for this entity. I assure the public that funds are indeed available in the 2026-2027 budget for this commission. Under this item previously used for the National Task Force for Ending Gender-Based Violence in the amount of $42,900. Of course, any funds required beyond this allocation will be found within the ministry's budget. It should also be noted that the commission will be housed in our newly renovated VB Munnings building on Pitt Road. Madam President, with the passage of the Protection Against Violence Act, the Commission's work will be centered on ensuring that this act is fully implemented. Madam President, the National Women's Advisory Council continued its work and hosted another successful Women's Symposium in February 2026. The Council also held a training session on sexual harassment in the workplace and honored 15 women in the area of law and order for the International Women's Day. I thank Ms. Sophia Thompson and Patrice Astwood McDonald, Chairperson and Deputy Chairperson of the Council, respectively, as well as the other members of the Council and their partners for their hard work. Be assured that it has not gone unnoticed. We see you and we appreciate your efforts. Madam President, we will be building capacity within the Department of Gender and Family Affairs, and we source additional staff to ensure that the department is equipped to meet its mandate. Safe houses. Madam President, the Ministry of Social Services is happy to report that we are in the process of completing the renovations of 2 properties to serve as safe houses. We wish to thank our former Minister of Social Services, the Honorable Miles LaRota, for commencing the process. These houses will have the capacity to accommodate up to 24 individuals who find themselves in distress. We are anticipating that these much-needed facilities will be completed and ready for use within the next 2 to 3 months. Progress is truly here. The Department of Social Services. According to the latest U.S. CDC data, autism affects about 1 in 31 children. Based on this rate, it is estimated that around 7,000 children in the Bahamas may be affected by autism. This highlights the urgent need for early screening, diagnosis, therapy, school support, and community awareness. While there are several private schools in the Bahamas that offer services for children with autism, it is unclear whether all are registered with the relevant educational authorities and whether they consistently employ qualified special educators, speech-language pathologists, occupational therapists, behavior therapists, and other trained professionals. The Ministry of Education has made significant strides in supporting children with special needs through dedicated special education units and trained teachers. I thank the former Minister of Education, Mrs. Glenys Hannah Martin, for being instrumental in ensuring that the need is highlighted. I would also like to thank the Minister of State for Immigration and Foreign Affairs, Honorable Darren Pickstock, for his support in bringing awareness to autism. Nevertheless, the demand for services continues to exceed the available resources. With an estimated 7,000 children in the Bahamas affected by the ASD, the need for specialized educational and therapeutic support remains high. Although private schools provide valuable services, the cost is often prohibitive. For many families, making it difficult to sustain long-term intervention. Additionally, while there are some services available for children, there are very limited opportunities for adolescents and adults who have aged out of the school system. Madam President, I am happy to advise that a $750,000 allocation has been placed in our budget for autism. REACH has been identified as a key partner, and we will continue to work with them and other similar organizations to define the most urgent need that can be provided by social services. Madam President, the Department of Social Services cover a wide variety of services, from food, burial, rent, and health assistance, to foster care and disability allowances, and more. It manages children and senior citizens' homes. Its scope of work is vast. Since the last budget communication, the department continued its pursuit of transformation. We recognize that the internal customer must receive attention to give the best to our clients. This means providing improved working conditions conducive to productivity, as well as revising policy where needed. Madam President, many children are presently residing in residential care facilities throughout the Bahamas that can be placed in foster homes. Foster homes can provide normalcy and a sense of belonging for children having entered care because of abuse, abandonment, neglect, or being orphaned. Foster homes offer a safe, secure, and nurturing atmosphere that promotes the children's well-being and healthy development. The Department of Social Services has budgeted $698,350 to assist foster parents to meet the educational and clothing needs of children placed in their care. Emotional assistance can be provided to foster parents to support the placement process and facilitate a smooth transition for the child into their new home environment. Once children are placed in foster homes and they are thriving, the foster parents can apply to the Supreme Court to become their adoptive parents. We are in need of more caring, responsible foster parents. Children don't need a perfect home, but they need a stable home. Remember, children thrive in stable environments. Madam President, a preliminary assessment of the department confirmed that staff continue to serve individuals and families facing poverty, homelessness, crisis, and other vulnerabilities while carrying these significant national responsibilities with limited capacity. The findings also reinforce an important principle. Assistance remains necessary, but assistance alone is not enough. This principle must guide the future direction of all assistance currently provided by the Department of Social Services. Madam President, during the fiscal period of 2025-2026, the department provided 1,731 temporary shelter assistance at a cost of $3,058,600 in New Providence alone. This figure reflects the government's ongoing effort to ensure that no Bahamian is left without support during a time of crisis. While temporary accommodations remain an essential intervention, it is insufficient to meet the demands. Therefore, our objective must be to support individuals and families in moving toward stabilization, responsibility, resilience, and long-term functioning. Madam President, social services is an investment in national stability. This is especially true in the area of temporary shelter. Every family prevented from homelessness, every individual assisted through a period of crisis, and every person successfully transitioning towards stability represents an investment in stronger communities and a stronger Bahamas. The goal is not simply to provide temporary shelter in response to homelessness. Rather, the goal is to provide a pathway to stability, one that leads to reducing reliance on the state and promoting empowerment. Madam President, I'm advised that those clients who have been able to save and to exit our shelters generally complain of their inability to find affordable housing, particularly for large families. This means that the current policy to provide a maximum of $1,200 per year in rental assistance to a successful applicant is simply not adequate. Consideration will be given to seeking an increase to provide a greater level of financial assistance. Madam President, as I said, poverty reduction is high on the Davis-led administration's agenda. The Ministry of Social Services is encountering a great deal of homelessness, even though employment numbers have improved. The high rise in the cost of rental properties is one of the contributing factors. The ministry will engage other relevant government entities to discuss an innovative model that provides families with temporary housing while permitting them to save and transition into home ownership. The model, From Poverty to Stability, is designed to provide a structured pathway for vulnerable families to transition from poverty and housing insecurity to home ownership. This program proposes the identification of 20 families in the first instance currently living in poverty who demonstrate the willingness and potential to participate in the program. The program is holistic and will also include job training and workforce development, and other relevant areas will be provided. Once the program is deemed successful, it will be replicated throughout the Bahamas. Madam President, since my appointment to this ministry, I have felt the urgency of this work in a very personal way. Behind every request for assistance is a person carrying a burden. Behind every application is a family trying to make ends meet. Behind every crisis is a Bahamian who needs help and who needs that help delivered in a timely fashion with dignity and fairness. This is why our work must continue. We will strengthen services. We will enact legislation and policies where they're needed. We will improve coordination. We will increase staff where resources allow. We will continue the work of modernizing our systems so that we make interacting and transacting with our ministry more efficient. But our goal cannot simply be to respond to crisis after crisis. We must help our people move from crisis to stability. We must help reduce long-term dependency on social assistance. We must strengthen families. We must create pathways for Bahamians to build better futures for themselves and for their children. That is the path we chart, from crisis response to resilience, from dependency to opportunity, from poverty to stability. Madam President, even with our best efforts, the government alone cannot carry out this work. The needs are too many. The pressure facing families are real. The hardship in some houses is too deep. That is why, under my leadership, the ministry will continue to call on others to stand with us in support of the elderly and the disabled, the abused and the displaced, and all those who have fallen on hard times. We will continue to work with NGOs, churches, civic organizations, community groups, and private citizens to reach as many people as possible. We encourage families wherever they are able to care for the elderly parents and relatives who need support. We encourage those who are financially stable, mentally and physically, and of good character, and committed to helping a child in need, to consider adopting a child currently in our foster system. Because, Madam President, this works belong to all of us. The Ministry of Social Services may be the safety net, but the fabric of care across our nation must be strengthened by families, churches, communities, civic organizations, and every citizen who believes no Bahamian should be left alone in their hardest hour. Madam President, I feel the weight of this responsibility. I accept it with humility, and I pledge that I will lead this ministry with compassion, urgency, and a deep commitment to the people who need us most. It will take all of us working together to ensure that every Bahamian has a chance to live with dignity, security, and hope. Madam President, I am pleased to support the 2026-2027 budget, and I thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Barbara Cartwright, for your contribution. As many? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Orinthia Kumalafe. Senator Kumalafe, you have the floor.
Madam President, I rise in this honorable place, giving honor to Almighty God in whom I live, move, and have my being. Madam President, I owe a debt of gratitude to God, who has brought me thus far through many dangers, toils, and snares. As I reflect on my life's journey, I am humbled by the opportunity to sit in this honorable place. Madam President, I was born over the hill and spent 12 years in the public school system within the Bain and Grantstown community. I attended Mother Donaldson's preschool, later St. John's Preschool, attached to my home church, St. John's Native Baptist Church on Meeting Street, Willett Patton Primary School, just next door, and C.R. Walker Secondary School on Blue Hill Road and School Lane, before proceeding to the then College of the Bahamas in Oaksfield. Madam President, to save my parents money, I maintained full-time employment in private and commercial banking while attending COB before continuing my tertiary level education in the United Kingdom, where I went on a wing and a prayer. Madam President, God has been faithful, and His mercy has kept me and will continue to keep me. Yes. Madam President, I have commenced my inaugural speech with this acknowledgement because God is the foundation upon which my political career and my life is based. He is my anchor and the reason why the winds, waves, and storms do not move me. I would be remiss if I did not pay tribute to my family and the village that has helped raise me. In this moment, I pay tribute to my grandparents, especially my maternal grandmother, the late Hilda Francina Cooper, who was a suffragette who fought for the right of women to vote. Her story and contributions are featured in Marion Bethel's acclaimed documentary, Womanish Ways. Without her advocacy and those of hundreds of Bahamian women, I could not stand here today, Madam President, or run for elected office as I have done. I also acknowledge my paternal grandfather, James Arthur Brannan, and my late paternal grandmother, Cynthia Brannan, née Murray, who were constant supporters of mine from my childhood days. My grandmother, Cynthia, predicted my path to becoming a lawyer, and my grandfather, now 99 years old, has been a constant supporter of my political journey. Madam President, my grandfather read and cut my weekly columns out in the Nassau Guardian each week, where I opined on social, political, and economic matters concerning and confronting our nation for years. The love and sacrifice of my parents, Bradley and Jennifer Brannan, ensured that I did not give up when life's challenges came. Madam President, I came from a lineage of strong and striving women. From Grammy Hilda to my mother to me, we never buckle under pressure. My mother has always been a go-getter who worked her way from humble beginnings to the middle class. My father worked as a public servant for over 40 years before retiring a few years ago. My siblings, including my late brother Brandon, and my surviving siblings, Anton, Anthony, and Marcus, and their significant others, and my dear cousin, Diana Cooper, have all supported me through thick and thin. Hence, my success is our family's collective success. Madam President, it would be an understatement to say that I could not have made it this far without the love and encouragement of my husband, Emmanuel, my #1 supporter, who has seen me along this journey in the good times and bad times, and our children, Morgan Elizabeth, Alexandria Grace, and Joshua Oluseyi. Madam President, I grew up in Carmichael, and it was indeed a pleasure for me to return to the community that has given so much to me during the last election cycle. The people of Carmichael are family to me, and during the campaign season, they welcomed me into their homes and businesses. I am grateful to my managers, Mr. Ambrister, Butler, and Ferguson, Association Chair Curry and her executive team, my greater campaign team, and they are too many to name. They too are responsible for me standing here in this place. For this, I am grateful and I thank them. It is an honor and a privilege to carry the banner of the Free National Movement on behalf of the Bahamian people and residents of Carmichael who have supported and continue to support me in my public life. I wish to publicly thank the Leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition, the Honorable Michael C. Pintard, National Party officers, leadership bodies, advisory and meritorious councillors, and past parliamentarians who have reposed their confidence in me. I am eternally thankful. Finally, I would like to congratulate you, Madam President, on your election for the second consecutive time as President of the Senate, Vice President Major, and my fellow Senate colleagues. Madam President, more than 14 years ago, I penned a two-part series in the Nassau Guardian entitled The Bahamian Dream. In those articles, I sought to articulate the dreams and aspirations of our forefathers and foremothers who fought for the many privileges we now enjoy. I reflected on the journey of the generations that have since followed to realize that dream. In defining the Bahamian dream, I could not help but acknowledge that I have been blessed to lay hold of that dream, and I lamented the reality that many Bahamians have watched and are watching that dream slip away from them. My voyage into the perilous world of politics was inspired by the desire to ensure that the Bahamian dream is not an illusion for the average Bahamian. This dream promises, dare I say guarantees, that all Bahamians are equal and entitled to the same opportunities. These include protection by the government, access to quality education, affordable health care and housing, and an environment that fosters ownership, entrepreneurship, and the creation of job opportunities for thousands of Bahamians. However, Madam President, increasingly, we are witnessing a growing divide in our nation. The divide between the haves and the have-nots is too big for my liking. The state of our infrastructure in public systems like education, health care, and road maintenance leaves little to be desired. And there is a growing divide between the political class and the people. This is why, Madam Speaker, I am troubled by the heightened level of voter apathy that has crept into our political process. If we are being honest with ourselves, this is not who we are as a people. Bahamians have always taken interest and pride in voting in or voting out their leaders. The strength of our democracy and our record of strong national development lies in the above-average political engagement of our people when compared to other nations, large and small. We have boasted of voter turnout in the low 90% or high 80%. Regrettably, we witnessed a voter turnout of 66% during the 2026 general election, which was identical to the 65% voter turnout during the 2021 general election. We had hoped that the low voter turnout in 2021 was attributable to the COVID pandemic, but the turnout in 2026 points to a deeper problem. A large portion of our people seem to have lost faith in the electoral process and political leaders. It seems that hopelessness is creeping in. It is not uncommon, Madam President, to hear eligible voters justify their abstention from the polls by referencing the loss of faith in national leaders and the notion that nothing changes regardless of who is elected to govern. Madam President, it leads me to reflect on the scripture verse in Proverbs 29:18, where there is no vision, the people cast off restraint. It effectively means, Madam President, the people need a clear direction as to where they're going. They need a sense of purpose, which encourages them to continue to participate in the political process. Otherwise, they would abandon the discipline of carrying out their civic, and some may say moral duty and obligation to vote for the leaders of their choice. Yes, Madam President, we hear the chants of the people chose progress and 33-8, and the other side is entitled to celebrate their victory. However, Madam President, they should do so with humility and an understanding that this does not give them a blank check to say and act as they please. 65% of the voting population did not vote for the current administration. They either voted for another party, candidate, or stayed home. Despite this fact, the governing side must govern for all, not just the 35% who voted for them. Yes, history was made in that for the first time in almost 30 years, our general election produced a two-term government. At the same time, for the first time ever, that two-term government did not achieve more than 50% of the popular vote to govern. Now, One can boast and say,
Point of order. Point of order, Madam President.
I was a bit distracted.
Point of order, the senator's statement is actually untrue. While we accept that, like every other state, if you take the percentage of votes obtained of all registered voters, this government did not obtain 50% of that, of the persons who chose to vote, which is a free choice. You can do it or you can choose not to do it. We did do that, Madam Speaker, so that is deceptive. We take their point of 70 divided by 50 is 30-something. In Barbados, for instance, they got 79% of the cast votes in Barbados and still got a lower percentage than this administration did. So to be honest, the first point is correct, the second point is not.
Thank you, Senator. The Honorable Wayne.
Madam President, I thank the minister for reinforcing my point that the current administration did not receive 50% of the popular vote.
Point of order, Madam Speaker. Sorry, Madam President. The popular vote are persons who chose to vote. The point that they are making that is true across the entire world and in which we still end up with a higher percentage is the percentage of registered voters, persons eligible to vote, not the popular vote.
Thank you.
Madam President, point of order.
Sure, go ahead.
What was
The
the
chair
point?
recognizes
What was the? Thank you.
Senator Honorable Rick Fox.
Thank you. What was the point of order? I missed that.
All right.
It is,
Inaccurate.
resume your seat, please, so that he can answer you.
Okay.
Because two senators can't be on the floor at the same time. Can you?
The point of order was that the point made by Senator Komalafe was inaccurate and therefore misleading.
Yes.
As I said, the
I think
first part about the percentage of people who could have voted if they chose to, that's correct. The point about the popular vote is a percentage of those who actually came out to vote.
Yes, thank you. Please proceed, Senator Komalafe.
Now one can boast and say a win is a win. That is true for a political organization and its supporters. But is that a win for the country and for nation building? We must not lose sight of ourselves, Madam President, and focus only on our personal ambitions and achievements. We are here to build a country for successive generations of Bahamians, not just win elections. We cannot leave less for those who will come behind us compared to what our forefathers and foremothers left for us. This is why it is incumbent upon us who serve in this honorable place to help reverse this trend by laying the vision of our nation's social, economic, and political development while inspiring trust in our leadership and encouraging our people to dream again and continue to remain engaged in the political process. Madam President, we are here to debate the 2026-2027 budget and compendium of bills associated thereto. This is not our individual budget. This is a debate that examines the stewardship of the people's money during the 2025-2026 fiscal year and scrutinizes the projections for the upcoming 2026-2027 fiscal year. In this regard, this exercise must consider historical data and context while adequately assessing the forecast for the future. These numbers mean nothing without underlying plans, programs, initiatives, projects, and operations, or as I mentioned earlier, vision. This is why we are here. We are here to talk about how the monies collected from the people are being spent by the government. This is a budget, not a speech marathon, not a speech contest or competition. This budget debate is about the Bahamian people. But I ask the question, what's in the budget for the people? Madam President, during your inaugural speech, as you commenced your second consecutive term as President of the Senate, you made a cogent point. You reminded us that we do not speak for constituencies, but rather we speak for the Bahamian people. Madam President, I do not take this responsibility for granted. My participation in frontline politics has always been about speaking on behalf of the Bahamian people. It has never been about power, fame, fortune, glamour, or prestige. I have taken the road less traveled by many to be the voice of the voiceless, an advocate of the oppressed, a mouthpiece for the marginalized, and voice of reason in a world that promotes superficiality. Against this backdrop, I have recommitted myself to the mantra of service to God, family, and country in this hallowed place, and it is my intention to serve with integrity, dignity, and courage as I speak for the Bahamian people. Madam President, as I proceed to make my substantive contribution to the budget debate, it is imperative that I raise a few concerns on behalf of the Bahamian people. I speak to these matters with the hope that we will consider them in these chambers with humility, soberness, and objectivity. The Bahamas is not a dictatorship or autocracy. We boast of one of the oldest democracies in the Western Hemisphere, with a continuous parliamentary democracy since 1729. It is my prayer that the phrase coined by Sir John A. Macdonald, the first Prime Minister of Canada, that describes the Senate as the chamber of sober second thought, continues to hold true in this chamber. This is crucial for the sustenance and development of a democracy which U.S. President Abraham Lincoln defines as a government of the people, by the people, for the people. A democracy works where the executive, legislature, judiciary, and the fourth estate function as they ought, independent of one another without interference or intimidation. Madam President, financial services is the second pillar of our economy and second largest contributor to gross domestic product, GDP. This industry is responsible both directly and indirectly for millions of dollars in government revenue. The Bahamas, as an international financial center, depends heavily on a robust regulatory framework, qualified professionals, but more importantly, its reputation globally. This is one of the reasons why we must guard our nation's reputation and take seriously anything that puts that reputation in question. This is why the Bahamian people are understandably embarrassed by the serious allegations of drug trafficking and money laundering emanating from an action within the Southern District of New York. Even more disturbing are the allegations suggesting that a member of that other place met with individuals that he or she thought were members of an international drug cartel within our Parliament building. It is further concerning, Madam President.
Senator Kumalafe, please yield. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Kenan Johnson.
Madam President, rise on point of order relevance.
Yes.
Madam President, it has to be obviously intentional, given the wide array of things you could speak about in a budget debate. But this is clearly not any part of what the budget is supposed to be about. So I ask that we stick and we speak about the fact that in the Senate, we should be giving some level of intelligence to the people as it relates to the budget. So we should not be here talking about something that has absolutely no relevance to the budget whatsoever.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Kenan Johnson. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Rick Fox.
Madam President, point
What
of
is the
order
matter? Yes. What is the
around misleading the Bahamian people about what is relevant to the budget.
Senator Fox?
Relevance to our budget is our brand, is our country's brand, where we make our money as from the Ministry of Tourism. When our brand diminishes, we make less money. Hence, we make less money for the Bahamian people to spend in these ministries. That's the relevance.
Thank you, Senator Fox.
Madam President,
Senator Komalafe.
I spoke to the financial services industry and the importance of its contribution to gross domestic product. The issues and the allegations that are concerned for the Bahamian
Senator,
people.
listen to the chair, please. The chair is speaking. Both you and I cannot speak at the same time. Let us establish something here. Your contribution must be relevant to the debate, okay? The matters that you're speaking of are before the courts. It's under investigation. I hereby caution you not to speak to those matters. Now, I'm going to give you the opportunity to withdraw. I want to have it expunged from the record.
Madam President, we are speaking to an issue that is of importance to the Bahamian people. The relevance
I
of the
understand what you
matter
said.
goes to the heart
No,
of
no.
a industry that contributes significantly to our gross domestic product. That is the financial
Beyond
services
that, Senator
industry.
Komalafe, beyond that,
For
Sen-
which the, for which,
Senator Kalafi, we have a long way to go. This is not going to be Jack in the Box. You're not going to go back and forth with this. I have stated to you that this is a matter before the courts in the United States, and it's under investigations here in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. The chair is giving you two options at this time, so I'm going to rule that you should not make any references to those matters. Okay, that's my ruling. It's not up for debate. So I'm going to give you two options, which are either you withdraw or the chair will have it expunged from the record. And which option are you taking at this time, Senator Komalafe?
we'll have it expunged from the record, Madam President.
Thank you. So please proceed, and I'd like for you to come back to relevance without any mention of the matters that you stated before.
Madam President.
Just remind you of the rules. If you cannot come back to relevance, the chair will then ask you to please resume your seat. So I suggest that you stay on relevance as I stated in my ruling. And I thank you. Please proceed, Senator
Thank you,
Komalafe.
Madam President. Madam President, our generation of leaders must protect the inheritance that our forefathers and foremothers willed to us. The Bahamas is a strong brand, known as a top global tourist destination, an international financial center, a country with the third highest GDP per capita in the Western Hemisphere, and an enviable standard of living and quality of life. We cannot police every citizen. We can only hope and pray and admonish our citizens to walk before God and be blameless, to do good and shun evil. However, Madam President, those of us in high authority must serve and act with the highest moral character, not flawless, not without sin, but seeking to do that which is good in the sight of God and the people. In the meantime, the Bahamian people expect that there is no cover and no protection from the full extent of the law for a man or woman who has brought shame upon our people or our nation. Madam President, I transition to an oversized cabinet. Madam President, the budget debate is about the stewardship of taxpayers' funds by the elected government. At a time when Bahamians are struggling to make ends meet and are being advised to tighten their belts, the current administration boasts of one of, if not the largest cabinet in modern Bahamian history. The reality, Madam President, is that all costs associated with the Davis administration's oversized cabinet will be borne by the Bahamian people in this budget and taxpayers. We accept that the Progressive Liberal Party won the elections with a parliamentary majority of 33 members in that other place, compared to 8 members for the Free National Movement. The people have spoken, and we accept their will. However, Madam President, that will not preclude a small but mighty opposition from speaking truth to power. Madam President, the current Davis administration has made 29 of the members in that other place cabinet ministers, and additional persons have been appointed as parliamentary secretary. For context, Madam President, Jamaica, with a population of 2.8 million persons, has 18 cabinet ministers. Trinidad and Tobago, with a population of 1.5 million people, has 18 cabinet ministers. And our neighbors to the north, the United States of America, with a population of 340 plus million persons, has 15 cabinet ministers. Madam President, when compared to our Commonwealth counterparts, Australia, the United Kingdom, and India, the numbers are like our regional counterparts. Canada, with a population of 41 million and 14 ministers. Australia, 28 million and 18 ministers. The UK, 70 million and 22 ministers. And India, 1.4 billion and 30 ministers. Rather than true decentralization of government and devolution of powers to bring government closer to the people, The current administration has increased the size of central government. This is deeply concerning, Madam President, because apart from the financial implications of the Bahamian people having to bear the burden of this expanded government, it also threatens the foundation upon which our parliamentary democratic system is based. To ensure that there is proper separation of powers, the legislature must remain independent of the executive, and the executive independent of the judiciary, the three branches of government. A leader, and in this case the Prime Minister, who places 89% of his parliamentary team inside his cabinet, can be seen to be stifling the democratic process by ensuring the whip is constantly on and loyalty remains to the first among equals. That is, the Prime Minister is paramount, as opposed to loyalty to the people who sent these honorable men and women to our parliament in the first place. As I mentioned earlier, Madam President, we are a democracy, not an autocratic nation or a dictatorship. It is evident that the governing side is tone deaf or oblivious to the sentiments and plight of the average Bahamian. This action by the executive leaves hardly any backbenchers in the other
Madam
place.
President,
Senator Kumalafe, please kindly yield. Chair, can I send in the Honorable Jayan Major?
the
Nature of your intervention?
honorable senator made a statement that, in my view, is her opinion. She made a statement of fact, and that's misleading to the Bahamian people. So I suggest that this is the statement where she said we have no relevance for the Bahamian people. And whatever her last statement was, she didn't say, yeah, the government is tone deaf. That's her opinion, Madam President. She cannot say that this administration is tone deaf to the Bahamian people.
It is, in fact.
It is not a fact. It is a statement of your opinion, Madam President. If the administration was tone deaf to the voices of the Bahamian people, the voices of the Bahamian people would not have voted for this administration. It's a statement. It's not a statement of fact.
Senator Kumalafe.
It's a statement of her opinion.
I would suggest Senator Kumalafe.
In my view, Madam President.
Or in my opinion.
In my view.
Or in my opinion, right?
In my opinion. Thank you.
Otherwise,
my view.
Senator Kumalafe, you would have had to table evidence to support that. So in my view, in my opinion.
In my view. In my opinion.
Thank you.
And could be the opinion of many others, Madam President, that the governing side is tone deaf or oblivious to the sentiments and plight of the average. But you all already there. We're fine. We're fine. This action by the executive leaves.
Kumalafe, just speak to the chair.
Yes,
Stay
Madam
focused on the
President.
chair.
Yes, Madam
And I will
President.
protect you.
Yes,
Don't
Madam
mind
President.
the other noise. Stay focused
This
on the chair.
action,
Stay focused
Madam
on the
President. This action, Madam President.
Order.
The longer your party, the longer we act like this.
Order.
This action, Madam President, by the executives leaves hardly any backbenchers in that other place to ensure that there are checks and balance on the executive arm of government. This is indeed a travesty and, in my opinion, a bastardization of the Westminster system. And that is certainly not progress, Madam President. Connected to this matter, and on the same topic about the spending of the people's money, is the appointment of persons connected to the gaming industry to the cabinet of the Bahamas. This is also a matter of concern for the Bahamian people. Unfortunately, the Gaming Board has engaged in linguistic gymnastics rather than directly answering a simple question. Do the two cabinet ministers in question or their family members have direct or indirect financial or beneficial interest in a licensee of the Gaming Board? Madam President, we are a nation of laws, and our people simply want to know that Lady Justice is blind. In essence, there is equality all before the law, for all before the law. No one is above the law, and the law is applied regardless of status or position. If we, the Bahamian people, must bear the cost of additional ministries established with staffing, brick and mortar offices, and technological needs, among other things, then we must be absolutely satisfied that there is a vision and a strategy for these new ministries, and above all, that the rule of law is being followed by the government itself. The failure to adequately address this matter is certainly not progress.
Madam Speaker, I was waiting to hear what violation
Recognizes the Honorable
The-
Wayne Monroe.
the senator suggests that the government of which three senators here are a part of have breached the rule of law, which is a very serious allegation. I know that the party, the F&M, had threatened to file an action in the court, and that is where the rule of law plays out. If you have a view, you test it in front of the courts. You can stand up and talk about what you think all you like, but you can go to court and be told you're right or you're wrong. But to suggest that this government has done something that breaches the law is an imputation on three senators here, and I would ask for it to be expunged.
Yes.
Point of order.
Senator Ellsworth Johnson, the chair recognizes you.
In response to my learned friend, that, yes, that justice must be, not only be done, but must be seen to be done. And it's critical in determining whether the rule of law is being applied as to whether or not the man on the street has that appreciation that the rule of law is being applied. My learned friend indicated that the body responsible for monitoring and supervising the gaming industry has not, in her opinion, done a sufficient job to answer the question as to whether or not there is any connection between the persons appointed to the cabinet and those businesses. They don't have, that body doesn't have the luxury to give uncertain answers. It should be a yes or no, and that body has an obligation to conduct the necessary inquiry to ensure that there's no breach. Not only does that body has the necessary responsibility, the minister responsible for that body, not only does the minister responsible for that body is to ensure that, but the cabinet should ensure that persons connected with the gaming industry in the spirit and intent of the law has absolutely no connection. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just 1 second.
Madam
Senator,
Madam
Senator Wayne
President,
Monroe.
the statement by the Gaming Board for the Commonwealth of Bahamas was clear and unequivocal. The complaint that I make is to suggest that the government of which I am a member, Senator Fitzgerald is a member, Senator Cartwright is a member, has breached the rule of law, is what I find is offensive in the imputation. The simple fact of the matter is we talk about the law being seen to be done. The F&M said they were going to sue over it. We still waiting. We are still waiting. When they bring their action before the court, the public can see in public whether they're right or whether they are just talking out of their heads.
Madam President, the minister would like to make this about him, his colleagues, and the government. This has nothing to do with that.
I think
This has to do with a statutory body who, in our view, has not provided a satisfactory response to queries that have been raised by the opposition.
Listen, Senator.
That is the simple
Senator
fact here.
Senator Kumalafe, resume your seat, please. Resume your seat. I see two issues here, Senator Kumalafe. The first one is that the first is with respect to what Senator Monroe is saying regarding the rule of law, and it's an offense under Rule 30, 14. Imputations of improper motives and personal reflections on senators shall be dealt with by the chair under the rules relating to order in the Senate and in the committee. And in addition to that, I see some issue here with Rule 30, Order 20, with respect to if you're referring to the conduct of a Senate or the character or conduct of any person in his official capacity or the public capacity, you need to offer notice to the president. So with respect to the imputations with respect to the government senators and the rule of law and the gaming board. I am going to order that is expunged from the record because I'm going to order that is expunged from the record because I do get a sense of improper motive that you are implying with respect to what you're saying in your speech, and they represent the government, as they said, right? And so actually, although your comments are general, it's inclusive of these ministers of the government who are represented here in the Senate.
Well, Madam President, I have to respectfully disagree that we were speaking to the operation and the response of a statutory body which is an agent of the government. It is an agent of the government. We were speaking to the conduct of the gaming board that refused to give a satisfactory response to queries raised by the opposition. No one mentioned any one individual senator or minister or member of the government.
You're referring to a statutory body, and I'm not getting into the debate, but you're referring to a statutory body that actually gave an official statement.
An official
I
statement that we
remember-
deemed unsatisfactory.
Precisely, that is your opinion. Because you
It is.
deem it unsatisfactory, then you cannot impute that or impart that onto the statutory body, right? You cannot impart that onto the statutory body, okay? So I'm going to expunge those comments from the record, but please proceed with your contribution. Thank you.
Madam President, I transition to the issue of BPL and power outages. Madam President, reliable and affordable electricity is pivotal to the engine of our economy. This is important for both individuals and businesses across our nation. The government needs a robust economy to meet its fiscal targets. This brings me to the issue of power outages. The summer months are upon us, and the temperatures are high across the Bahamas. Bahamians continue to lament the power outages across the country despite the government's constant touting of its energy reform plan. Private citizens and businesses are feeling the effects alike. The heat and inconvenience are unbearable for parents with young children, the elderly and sick who need constant power supply for their medication. They simply want to know what is going on with Bahamas Power and Light, BPL, and Bahamas Grid Company, BGC. Madam President, we still don't have the full story on what transpired and led to the departure of Pike. Have the assets securing BPL's 40% ownership in BGC been legally transferred to BGC? Who are the investors that own 60% of BGC? Madam President, it's very disappointing that despite multiple questions surrounding this major national asset, the Davis administration continues to avoid providing direct answers. Even more disappointing is the fact that the Davis administration has not followed the practice instituted by successive F&M administrations that when key utility and public assets are sold or restructured, ownership within those assets are offered to the average Bahamian. This is how you build wealth, Madam President. These are types.
The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Latrell Ryan. What is the nature of your intervention, Senator Rahman?
Leading the public, Madam Speaker. Madam President. I think she alluded that. Pardon me?
Is your mic turned on, Senator Rahman?
I speaking to the Madam President.
Senator Rahman, is your mic turned on?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just want to advise all senators when you're speaking to please ensure that your mic is turned on, because yesterday some of us were apparently not turning on our mics, and so the recording, your voices were not heard during the broadcast. So please ensure that your mics are on when you're speaking. I'm sorry, Senator Rahman, can you please proceed?
The senators misleading members of the public. The Davis administration, in a speech, said the government, I believe, is avoiding questions in regard to the BGC and the energy reform. We invited the members of the opposition to come and ask those same questions. I believe it was the then candidate and Senator Michael Barnett who attended. Now, if she didn't ask the questions, that's not the fault of the government.
Madam President, this is a
Thank you,
question that is being...
Just wait.
Yeah.
Just wait, please. Thank you, Senator Rahman, for your clarification. Senator
Yes, Madam President, thank you.
Komalafe, please.
It is a question as it relates, I assume that is what the senator is speaking to, the ownership. The general public is not aware of the ownership. The general public is not aware of the ownership. Madam President, As I was saying, this is how you build wealth. These are the types of progressive policies which Bahamians are looking for their political leaders to implement. Madam President, Cable Bahamas, Bank of the Bahamas, Arawak Port Development, Commonwealth Brewery, and Nassau Cruise Port are all examples of formerly state-owned assets where an F&M administration offered ordinary Bahamians the opportunity to become shareholders. You had the opportunity to give us shares in BTC too. You forfeited that. Thus building a shareholders and ownership society. It appears that we have not been afforded this opportunity with BPL, which only granted the opportunity to purchase bonds at a cost of $50,000, an amount that most Bahamians do not have access to. Prior to this, 60% of BGC ordinary shares were sold to select unknown investors to the exclusion of the common man. Madam President, that is not progress. That's fostering a society built on exclusion and deepening the gap between those who have and those who do not. Madam President, according to a recent IDB report, the average Bahamian pays 5 times more than the Latin American and Caribbean average for power supply. This is despite the erratic and non-reliable power supply. According to the Central Bank of the Bahamas, March 2026 quarterly economic report, domestic energy prices trended upwards during the first quarter of 2026. The BPL fuel surcharge average head prices for the generation of less than 800 kilowatts per hour increased by 2.4% to 17.24 cents per kilowatt during the 12 months to February 2026. Further, the cost of usage of more than 800 kilowatts per hour rose by 8.8% to 21.24 cents per kilowatt hour. The question is this: when will the promise of reliable and affordable electricity become a reality for the Bahamian people? When will real relief be felt by the average Bahamian? Yet, the government brags about progress. Madam President, as a believer in Jesus Christ, I recognize that all of our help comes from the Lord. This is why it has been disappointing that the Prime Minister, and by extension his administration, have sought to take on a messianic or hero's posture by taking credit for the rebound of our nation's economy following the global COVID pandemic, which crippled not just the Bahamian economy, but the global economy. To be clear, all countries shut their borders during COVID. The Bahamas was not an exception. The closure of our borders was especially devastating for a country like ours, which depends mainly on tourism for its sustenance. No visitors or tourists meant that US dollars were not coming into our country. It meant that these visitors could not patronize hotels, Airbnbs, restaurants, straw vendors, tour guides, and thousands who depend on these visitors to feed their families and pay their bills. For the record, Madam President, the economies of all countries across the globe shrank significantly because of the global pandemic. In the case of the Bahamas, this was compounded by the negative impact of Hurricane Dorian, which made landfall just a few months before the pandemic. The Bahamian economy shrank by a whopping 25% in nominal terms and 16% in real terms in 2020, according to the IMF. According to the IDB, the Bahamas suffered $13.1 billion in total assets as a result of both COVID and Dorian. To put this in context, Madam President, this was almost equal to the GDP of the Bahamas, which stood at $13.5 billion in 2019. Tourism Analytics estimated that in 2020, international arrivals contracted by 76% for Bahamians, 67% for Barbados, and 69% for Jamaica. The fiscal deficit rose to $359 million in the second quarter of financial year 2020-2021, compared to $147 million in the previous year, as government revenue fell significantly while government expenditure increased. The inevitable reopening of the Bahamian economy resulted in the return of tourists and rebounding of our economy. According to the UN Tourism, 60 out of 111 destinations surpassed their 2019 arrival numbers in the first 9 months of 2024. For context, Qatar tourist arrivals grew by 141%, Albania grew by 77%, Saudi Arabia by 61%, Curacao by 48%, and Andorra by 36%. Simply put, Madam President, our country benefited from pent-up demand and the revenge travel phenomenon. We continue to see an increase in cruise passengers because of the expansion of the Nassau Cruise Port, which was commissioned under the F&M. However, our stopover visitor numbers remain unimpressive, even though, according to the Ministry of Tourism, it takes 28 cruise visitors to make up the spending of one stopover visitor. It is therefore paramount that the government develops a strategic plan to increase this important segment of our tourism product. Madam President, the credit rating of a nation is vital to access the international markets, interest rates, debt servicing, and the overall debt burden. During his budget communication, the Minister of Finance touted the credit rating upgrades. In fact, the side opposite likes to brag about the couple of ratings upgrade the country has experienced over the past few years. As a Bahamian, I am glad that our nation's sovereign rating has improved, even though our rating remains in junk bond status. However, the facts must be laid on the table. The Bahamas' credit rating was first downgraded to junk bond status from investment grade under a progressive Liberal Party administration in 2016. Following 4 consecutive downgrades under that administration. The truth is that our country has not regained investment grade status since that downgrade under the PLP in 2016. Madam President, the Davis administration has boasted about the increase in revenue, mainly from taxes, and how they've been good stewards of our economy. Yet, Madam President, the Bahamian people are having a difficult time reconciling these chest-beating announcements with their personal circumstances. But one can argue, Madam President, that the Bahamas should have been at investment-grade status by now. The Davis administration, by their own admission, has collected record revenue since taking office, and we have seen a record number of visitors come to our shores. Additionally, the Davis administration has faced no major storms, catastrophic natural disasters, and no pandemic. As the saying goes, to whom much is given, much is expected. It is difficult to identify how the sacrifices made by the Bahamian people has been benefiting us. We still have a healthcare system on life support, late garbage collection in some areas, poorly maintained roads, verges, parks, green spaces, public buildings, airports, and docks, among other things. Even more disturbing, accountability is shunned in the face of questions. Vendors and contractors complain of not being paid, and despite boasting about signing 60 labor agreements, labor leaders are still claiming that these agreements are not being honored fully, Madam President, as we witness a tremendous amount of labor protests during their last term in office. Madam President, a true commitment to returning our nation to investment-grade status, which the PLP is indebted to the Bahamian people to do, would see a government administration focused on fostering growth in the private sector rather than turning the Bahamas into a government country with significant reliance by the populace on government contracts and employment. A true commitment to returning our nation to investment-grade status would entail true economic diversification in the blue, orange, and green economies, manufacturing and real food security initiatives, not just nice words and talking points. The Davis administration should be more aggressive in attracting foreign direct investment to our shores, which creates jobs and entrepreneurial opportunities. Improving the ease of doing business remains a sore point, with reliable and affordable electricity being a key point. We are losing competitive ground to our regional counterparts. The capital is there, but it's not making its way to the Bahamas at the pace and levels we need. The truth is, Madam President, it is still too expensive for the Bahamas to borrow funds due to the junk bond status of our sovereign rating. It behooves the Davis administration to utilize the sacrifices of the Bahamian people carried by their tax collection policies to swiftly move our nation from junk bond status to investment grade. This is what they were hired to do. On the issue of cost of living crisis, Madam President, it is rough out there for our people. The Bahamian people are struggling to make ends meet. The governing party, in its blueprint for change issued in 2021, recognized the cost of living crisis and promised to address this issue. It was simply disappointing that one of their first actions was to increase value-added tax on bread basket items, medications, essentials, and sanitary products from 0 to 10% upon assuming office in 2021. To elaborate further, this includes grits, rice, bread, milk, cooking oil, detergent, baby food, baby cereal, baby formula, soups, cheese, corned beef, milk, flour, mayonnaise, soap, and tomato paste, just to mention a few. These are items that our people use or consume daily. This was disheartening for an organization that claims to have as its mission the wiping of every tear from every eye. I could deal with the zero. Wait, I get in there.
Stay focused.
Madam President, for historical context, it should be noted that VAT was introduced. We didn't interrupt communications. We didn't interrupt communications. We were told to follow the rules. It should be noted that VAT was introduced by the PLP during its term between 2012 and 2017. It is an established fact that VAT is not a progressive tax. It is a regressive tax that penalizes the poor and the less privileged in any society. Simply put, Madam President, VAT takes more funds out of the pockets of those who can least afford it. After blaming global events and the choices of Bahamians for the high cost of living, the government later decided to reduce the VAT rate on unprepared food to 5%, which they increased initially in 2025, and then making those limited items VAT exempt in 2026. It should be noted that the Davis administration made these items exempt and not zero-rated, which effectively places the tax burden on businesses and results in these added costs being passed on to consumers. Madam President, let's take a practical look at what this fiscal policy decision by the Davis administration costs. If we take a grocery item list of a loaf of bread, a carton of eggs, 1 pint of milk, a pack of Pampers, 2 jars of baby food, all at a cost at $60. Under the F&M zero-rated VAT policy, the total bill was $60. However, under the Davis administration's fiscal policy, the consumer, the taxpayer, will have to cough up an additional $6 for a total bill of $66. Now, that's not relief, Madam President. That's because the 10% was added to the breadbasket item, increasing the food bill of your citizens and expanding your tax revenue at the expense of those who can least afford it.
President.
The chair recognizes
It's
Senator
fact,
the Honorable.
Madam President. it's
Madam
fact.
The
President,
chair recognizes Senator the Honorable.
the
Monroe.
senator is being misleading. If you only ate that, she would be correct. If you didn't buy water, if you didn't buy the things that the former administration increased the VAT from 7.5% to 12%, what the senator is representing, it would be correct. But to reduce VAT by 2% across the board would limit her to be correct, that must be all that somebody consumes, nothing else.
Madam
Thank you,
President.
Senator Martin.
Yes, Madam
Please,
President,
Senator,
I'm not
please
here
proceed.
to debate the member's side. I am here to speak the facts. And the facts are that 10% was added to breadbasket items. You know, well, if you are familiar with the economics, you will know what the facts are. Madam President, it is worth pointing out that the additional $6 is the bare minimum for the increase in the grocery bill. Despite the Davis administration touting reducing VAT from 10% to 0%, they have chosen to make the identified items VAT exempt rather than zero-rated. This means, Madam President, grocers and business owners would not be able to claim tax credits against input like electricity costs and other operational costs. This effectively means that as the cost of electricity increases, and it has been increasing, the consumer will ultimately have to bear the increased cost incurred by businesses. Madam President, in an article published in the Tribune Business, SuperValue's president warned of potential food price increases in response to a $1.6 million annual cost increase caused by the government's VAT-exempt treatment of uncooked food. That is not progress. Madam President, added to the increased food bills of the Bahamians, the Davis administration, being fully aware of the fact that we import almost everything we consume in this nation, entered an agreement with a private entity to extract more funds from the Bahamian people's pocket. Madam President, the air freight tax or fee adds another layer of cost to Bahamians who use freight forwarders to ship their goods in from overseas. This cost added to VAT on goods, VAT on services, import duties, and shipping and handling has worsened the cost of living crisis for Bahamians. The price of gas, Madam President, is not a sensational topic to dismiss and point to the rising cost of fuel globally. We accept that there are external shocks that we have no control over, like global conflicts. However, Madam President, there are things we can do on our front to lessen the burden on our people. Madam President, during the last administration, the gas dealers, the petroleum retailers requested an increase in their regulated profit margins. The request by the dealers does not present a challenge for us, but the response by the Davis administration did not demonstrate care and concern for the cost of living crisis confronting the Bahamian people. Madam President, while the Davis administration granted the increase the dealers requested, under much duress, I might add, the government did not take a cut in their revenue margins at a time when Bahamians are being asked to uphold their end of the bargain by paying their taxes. And Madam President, VAT is on almost everything we consume. The government appears to be divorced from the realities of the people. Madam President, a small car has a tank size of 10 to 13 gallons, medium-sized cars 14 to 17, and SUVs 16 to 22, and large trucks and large SUVs 23 to 36. Madam President, at current gas prices, it would take at least $70 for a taxpayer, a Bahamian, to fill up their tank weekly, assuming one fill-up is all they need. That's $280 per month, Madam President, or $350 if there are 5 weeks in the month. Most people cannot afford that, Madam President, with competing bills of grocery, light bills, rent, or mortgages. We used to say that people live from paycheck to paycheck, but nowadays people live by day just to afford the basic necessities. Again, I ask, Madam President, what's in the budget for the people? The people want relief. This budget debate has been rife with nice words and nice speeches, boasting about electoral margins of victory and the record amount of revenue being raised. But this budget has been short on relief for the Bahamian people and a vision which actualizes the individual goals, needs, and concerns of the Bahamian people. Madam President, the 2026-2027 budget communication promises a new approach to state-owned enterprises in the upcoming fiscal year. This would have been commendable and believable if we had not heard the same rhetoric before. Allocations to state-owned enterprises under the Davis administration has increased to almost $700 million in the 26-27 budget, a significant increase from the previous fiscal year. This amount is up from the previous FNM and PLP-led administrations predating the Davis administration. Subsidies were hovering around $300 to $400 million. As a matter of fact, Madam President, if the financial secretary across multiple administrations gave directives for all government ministries, departments, and state-owned enterprises to implement cost-cutting measures. Additionally, statutory bodies were required to submit annual reports and strategies to become self-sufficient. Madam President, with a growing expense obligation to state-owned enterprises subsidies, it appears that this mandate has been abandoned. And despite committing to ensuring that state-owned enterprises become self-sufficient and sustain themselves, taxpayers are being burdened by additional costs to fund the inefficiencies and excess waste of these entities. In fact, we have seen and continue to see an increase in state-owned enterprises created under this administration without strategic plans, vision, and political will to wean them off the public treasury. Madam President, I submit that until these entities are run professionally, without political interference and patronage, we will continue to pay lip service to the notion that state-owned enterprises will become self-sufficient. On the matter of public-private partnerships, PPPs, and special purpose vehicles, SPVs, it is generally known and accepted that PPPs are important tools used by governments to deliver much-needed infrastructure, capital projects, goods, and services in an effective and efficient manner. These arrangements enable the government to accomplish its goals without the initial outlay of limited resources, which have competing priorities. However, these arrangements are prone to abuse, misuse, and corruption when they are not subject to a robust governance and management framework. The lack of transparency and full disclosure on the PPPs entered by the Davis administration, particularly as it relates to the government's long-term obligations, has left Bahamians suspicious of these arrangements. The concerns about PPPs have only been exacerbated using SPVs by the government. The Constitution Legal standing and purpose of a number of these SPVs have been brought into question by the official opposition without adequate answers from the Davis administration. In some cases, the board composition and business dealings of these SPVs have raised serious questions about the legitimacy and authority of these vehicles, whilst also acknowledging that parliamentary oversight has been diluted. The Fiscal Responsibility Council and the IMF have cautioned that this behavior weakens fiscal credibility and questions the true scale of public sector debt exposure. This is why the opposition welcomes the announcement by the finance minister that the government intends to develop a PPP assessment framework to strengthen transparency, efficiency, and approvals of PPPs. This is paramount if taxpayers are to receive value for money from these arrangements. My chief caution would be, Madam President, if there's a framework, follow it and comply with the reporting requirements. We have seen diversions from procurement laws and the fiscal responsibility legislation, among others. Passing laws, writing regulations, and building framework is not the government's deficiency. Enforcement and compliance is the main problem. Madam President, the financial services industry is one of the main pillars of our economy. This industry contributes between 15 and 20% to our nation's GDP, while building the middle and upper middle class. This is why the attrition within the financial services industry in general and international banking sector in particular demands urgent attention and action. According to the gross economic contribution of the financial sector in the Bahamas report for 2025, evolving international compliance standards and heightened supervisory requirements have contributed to further gradual consolidation without international banking and trust activities. The report goes on to note that the total number of banks and trust companies in the Bahamas have declined by 8 to 184 in 2025, following a decrease by 5 in 2024. Total assets of the international banking sector also fell by 4.7%, with total assets for this sector having decreased by 7.5% over the last 5 years. Total expenditure decreased by 2.7%, with contractions in non-staff administration costs, government fee payment, and salary expenses. Madam President, the central bank reported that the total number of employees in the international banking sector fell by 70, or approximately 10%, in 2025. These statistics are important to note because this sector provides well-paying jobs for Bahamians who in turn drive the engine of our economy. In 2025, the average base salary for domestic banks was $61,042 per annum when compared to the average base salary of $114,839 for international banks. This is a difference of approximately $54,000. There is an urgent need for a financial services strategic growth plan, which should be crafted in conjunction with the private sector and industry practitioners. Additionally, as an archipelago, more needs to be done to ensure that our family islands have access to basic financial services. Financial inclusion must remain a priority of the government. In this regard, the central bank must be commended for its efforts in the launch and ongoing promotion of Sand Dollar, our very own central bank digital currency, as well as plans for the modernization of the payment system. Madam President, the Minister of Finance in his budget communication highlighted that VAT receipts amounted to $1.1 billion for the first 9 months of the current fiscal year. Total revenue amounted to $2.5 billion, or 65% of the full year budget target. This should have been at approximately $2.9 billion and 75% of the full year budget target. VAT collection increased by $64.9 million, or 6.6%. Excise taxes increased by 3.5% to $7.4 million. Gaming taxes increased by 8.9% to $30.9 million, and taxes on the use of goods and permission to use goods increased by 22.2% to $273.5 million. Madam President, there is no doubt that the Davis administration has been extracting a lot of taxes from the economy. As we have seen exponential growth in government revenue and tax receipts over the last 5 years, the government's appetite for spending and borrowing seem to have grown simultaneously. For the first 9 months of the 25-26 fiscal year, aggregate expenditure amounted to $2.7 billion, with current expenditure amounting to $2.4 billion, a 2.9% increase when compared to the previous year. Consequently, the fiscal deficit stood at $157.5 million as at the end of March 2026. This is higher than the fiscal deficit of $130 million at the same time last year, and a far cry from the $75 million surplus projected by the government, which the finance minister is now forecasting to be a $35 million surplus. At the same time, central government debt rose by 6.4% from the previous year to $12.5 billion, of which external debt stood at $5.4 billion, or 43.4% of total central government debt. Madam President, it is important that we keep an eye on this external foreign currency debt component due to debt servicing, exchange control, and the U.S. dollar peg implications. Madam President, as I hasten to my conclusion, the government is projecting continued increase in revenue going into the next fiscal year. Total revenue forecast is $4.4 billion. Total expenditure is projected to be $4.1 billion, and a fiscal surplus of $223 million is expected for the upcoming fiscal year. The opposition submits that the fiscal surplus should not be at the expense of vendors and service providers. A real surplus is not achieved and should not be financed by vendors and contractors who are left with unpaid bills by the government. The finance minister in his presentation announced an increase in the first-time homeowner exemption under the Real Property Tax Act from $500,000 to $600,000. We welcome any relief and tax concession that lightens the burden on the Bahamian people. We are hopeful that this decision was guided by detailed data analysis to ensure that as much Bahamians as possible can benefit from this exemption. This is imperative as very few Bahamians are currently able to qualify for homes at a price tag of $500,000+. Talk less of afford the down payment and closing costs. This is the reality of many Bahamians in 2026. I reiterate the points I made earlier in my presentation, Madam President. The numbers touted by the governing side are of no interest to the average Bahamian who face the realities of a healthcare system in crisis, high cost of living, frequent power outages, rising prices at the gas pump, pothole-filled roads, and deteriorating infrastructure. They cannot touch and feel the progress that the government has been talking about. We are blessed to live in a democracy and not a dictatorship. Elected or appointed leaders in this nation work for the people. Yes. We must be accountable to the people on whose behalf we work. Questions about vouchers purchased by the Ministry of Finance and distributed during the election campaign, transfer of $700 million into the National Investment Fund, $141 million spent by the Public Parks and Beaches Authority, and status of any investigation demand answers to the Bahamian people who hired the government to manage their affairs. I am deeply troubled by the trajectory on which the discourse and public dialogue of some of our national leaders seem to be headed. Arrogance and nonchalance in the face of demand for answers from the Bahamian people is unacceptable in our democracy. This is one of the main reasons why the full implementation of a governance framework is essential, especially the Freedom of Information Act, which has received an inadequate allocation in the 2026-27 budget. Madam President, I am disturbed by what seems to be an attempt to censor or mute the official opposition. His Majesty's loyal opposition must not and will not be silenced. We will not be muffled or stifled. The Bahamian people's voice will be heard through us in this honorable chamber. We shall not retreat, and we shall not surrender. In our advocacy on behalf of the Bahamian people, we will be fierce but fair, resolute but respectful, fearless but reasonable. We will not oppose for opposing's sake, but make no mistake about it. We will not shy away from our duty to hold the government's feet to the fire. The Bahamian people demand no less of us in this honorable chamber. May God bless the deliberations of this chamber. May God bless the people of this nation. And may God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Senator the Honorable Orinthia Kumalafe, for your contribution. Thank you, Senator. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable J.Ann Major.
Madam President. Madam President, I didn't want to interrupt the good senator during her very robust speech, but I did have to rise on a point of order of misleading the public, and misleading the Senate. The senator got up and spoke on the administration in 2021. One of the first things we did was to increase VAT on breadbasket items, and she went on to name some 20 or so items. But let's be honest with the Bahamian people and honest with the people in this room. This administration also reduced VAT from 12% to 10% at that time. And since taking office, we've reduced VAT on 4 separate occasions. So if we're going to make statements like we added VAT to breadbasket items, let's state the full story and the full picture for the Bahamian people. And again, to stress that VAT is currently at 0 on those same food items, 0.
Madam President, if the Vice...
Senator, wait to be recognized, please.
Yes, sorry.
Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Orinthia Komolafe.
Yes.
Thank you.
Madam President, if the Vice President had listened to the entire contribution, I acknowledged that the rate was reduced on multiple occasions. I also acknowledged that it was reduced to 0%. What I did highlight was the fact that all zeros are not made equal. The 0% by the Davis administration was exempt, which places a burden and a cost on the business owner, which is transferred to the consumer. The 0% that was effected by the F&M administration goes direct to the savings of the consumer and does not impact the business owner. Hence the example of the $60 basket items, where $60 under the F&M would be your bill on those bread basket items that people use every day. If people are stopping on the side of the road buying their breakfast, their grits and corned beef, ask anyone. The cost of breakfast has gone up. It's obvious for all to see. Under the F&M, that same $60 basket would be, under the PLP, would be $66 because of the 10% applied to VAT. So it was highlighted. The acknowledgement that the reduction was made was there, and the contrast between the two fiscal policies effected under the F&M versus the PLP was also laid out very plainly for those to understand.
I think I was a little faster that time.
I'll come back to you. I promise, Senator.
I know I've been slow.
I promise I'll come back to you. Just let me hear from the good senator.
A point of clarification. I think it's important to clarify what has been happening over the period. The good senator in a speech, she selected the year she wanted to refer to about VAT increase and VAT decrease. She forgot to speak about 2012 when VAT was increased by the FM administration. 2018, sorry, when it was increased by the FM administration. Now, she may have forgotten that because she may have been leading another party at the time, so she would not have remembered that. But the same people she spoke against in increasing it, when she spoke about it then, she somehow left it out of her speech today. And I don't know if that's selective memory or she just needs to be clarified. Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Watt. Let me take it in turn. I know you're anxious. Senator, I promise Senator Fox that I'll return to him.
Yeah, I'm working on my speed, Madam President,
okay.
getting up and down.
Take your time. It's okay.
I'm slow on the way down.
Take your time. We have a long
I
road
just
ahead
want to
of us.
support my teammate here in the area of the breakfast conversation on the price of food going up around breakfast. I think if we just check the budget items around our school program, which you guys should be commended for, the Prime Minister's program on feeding our children in school, let's check the line item there and see if that went up. That might support the argument of food going up for breakfast.
Was that a point of order?
Thank you, Senator Fox.
Not that I dispute it. Not that I dispute it.
Let them speak in English.
Point of order.
Senator, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Wayne Monroe.
There are two problems with that, and that is it went up because we're now feeding more children. But more fundamentally, and what makes the point that Senator Komolafe misses, when you buy your breakfast on the side of the road, the VAT on the spoon, which is a cost item, went down. On the tissue, which is a cost item, went down. On the bowl that it went in, which is a cost item, went down. All of which had been raised by 60 or more percent by them and was put back to 10%. So although you get a zero base on grits, which is one of the least expensive part, and the tuna and corned beef, which is one of the least expensive part, you have a VAT reduction on the fork, the knife, the towel, the tissue, the container, and if you buy water or juice, you got a VAT reduction on that as well. And you would have gotten a VAT increase on that. So if you were able to get the grits and the sausage in your hand, you would have saved all that she said. You would have had the increase that she said without the savings on the reduction on the other elements that went into producing the breakfast.
Thank you, Senator Honorable Wayne Monroe. The chair recognizes.
Madam President, it is clear that
Senator Honorable.
the good minister does not do grocery shopping. It is more expensive to buy grits. Did you mention, Madam President, did he mention that corned beef was more expensive than spoon and corned beef is more expensive than tissue? That is not a fact. The breakfast has gone up. Despite the savings they may have gotten on the spoon and the napkins, all of those items that you would purchase for breakfast for the most part appear in the bread basket, as a list on the list of bread basket items. And they attracted a 10% rate under this administration. And to the other good senator, no, sir, I did not forget my position in 2012 or 2013 as it were. The record clearly reflects that I oppose the increase in the value-added tax. And the record also reflects that I also rejected and opposed the implementation of value-added tax initially under the PLP administration. I've been very consistent with my position. I have said on multiple occasions, and you are free to read my articles regarding the same over 5 years, that VAT is a regressive tax, something that I stressed in this contribution today. And it hurts those that are more poor. You don't get brownie prizes for taking something down from 12% to 10% when you initially implemented it. You were the one that put this atrocity on the backs of the Bahamian people. And so it is clear that we continue to remind the Bahamian people that this was initiated under a PLP administration.
All right, thank you, Senator Honorable Orinthia Komalafe. As many, the chair recognizes Senator Honorable Keenan Johnson. Senator Johnson, you have the floor.
Madam President, I rise on a lighter note, again, to make my maiden contribution in this Honorable Senate as we debate the 2026-2027 budget. I begin by giving thanks to the Almighty God for bringing me to this moment, Madam President, and to first congratulate you on your election for a second consecutive term as President of this Honorable Chamber. I also congratulate my colleague and friend, the Vice President, on her election, and to all of my colleagues on their appointments to this Honorable Chamber. Madam President, I wish to also thank the Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Edward Brave Davis, for the confidence that he has placed in me and appointed me to the Senate, and further by appointing me as Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology. And given that we had a little back and forth earlier about feeding, it's probably a good time to mention that we hit a landmark of 2 million breakfasts in the schools. So I don't take this appointment lightly, Madam President. I am here to serve in shaping the future of our children, which is a serious responsibility. But, Madam President, before I turn to policy and the budget, I ask your indulgence as I give a few personal remarks. Nearly 40 years ago, my late grandmother, Clara Rose Hall King, was appointed to serve in this very same chamber by the late Sir Lyndon Pindling. Today, as I stand here, I cannot help but think of her. I can only imagine how proud she would be to know that her grandson now stands here where she did before I was even born. I also remember, Madam President, my late grandmother-in-law, Carmen Neely. She embraced me long before I officially became family. In fact, Madam President, she called me her grandson before her granddaughter knew she wanted me. Madam President, It would also be remiss of me if I didn't clarify an incorrect statement made by the honorable colleague on the side opposite. And I wish to clarify by acknowledging the actual greatest fraternity there is, which I am honored to be a member of, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated.
But you weren't the first, so go.
There you go. Madam President, there is one person I must recognize in a very special way. That is my mother, Pauline Johnson. Madam President, she raised me on her own. She sacrificed for me. She carried me. And most importantly, Madam President, she prayed for me. And while I did not grow up rich, Madam President, I also never knew what it was to want or to need, because my mother carried the burden, so I didn't have to. She hates when I tell this story, but I always recall when I was in bar school in England in my final year. She sold her vehicle and walked to work every day for over a year, just so that my fees would be paid and that I would have what I needed. Madam President, there are sacrifices a boy never fully understands until he becomes a man. I can never repay her for what she has done, but I am so grateful that she is here in the gallery today to share in this moment with me.
Yes.
But Madam President, as she stands and takes her seat, I must admit that I've noticed a change in her over the past few years. For most of my life, she called me her one and only child. But over the last 2 years, she started calling me her one and only son. And that's because, Madam President, 2 years ago, my wife became her daughter. And that brings me to the next person I must recognize. My wife, Shakira, who's also in the gallery today. Yes, please stand.
That's it.
My wife.
That's it.
Madam President, anyone who knows me knows this.
One good wife.
Where you see me, you see my wife. And where you see my wife, you see me.
That's it.
And when you see us, Madam President, 12 times out of 10, we're matching. Because in the words of my good wife, we match together. Madam President, she is my best friend. She is my soulmate.
Oh, yeah.
She is my why.
That's it.
She is the one who keeps me grounded, Madam President. And despite my involvement in politics for more than 20 years, it is no coincidence that much of my growth and success came after I made her my wife. Madam President, some may even argue that she's a better politician than me. And I don't agree. But before I carried the title of senator, before I carried the title of parliamentary secretary, one of my favorite titles was simply Shakira's husband. And Madam President, she gave me the greatest gift that I could ever ask for, our daughter Kiera, who's also in the gallery today. Madam President, she is my heart, and most importantly, she is my legacy. This past election was especially meaningful because it was the first time that our daughter voted. And I can say, Madam President, with every bit of confidence in me, that as for me and my house, on May 12th, we crossed those lines, and we chose progress. Madam President, while I am new to this chamber, I am not new to public service. During the previous Davis administration, I was able to contribute to the wider work of the government. As chairman of the Town Planning Committee, I saw firsthand the value of transparency, accountability, and public participation. We worked to ensure that Bahamians became more aware of development applications. We expanded opportunities for public comment. We increased public hearings, and we strengthened public education about the role of town planning, the applications it considers, and the documents required for those applications. That progress, Madam President, mattered because development should never happen in silence. The public must know, the public must understand, and the public must have a voice. And we made sure, Madam President, that that happened. So I would like to recognize the committee members who served with me: Deputy Chairman Arrington Isaacs, AKA Minky, Aaron Jones, Dwight Charlo, Arthur Jones, Glenda Roca, Bishop Denzel Rule. I wish to also recognize the key members of the Department of Physical Planning, who I also work closely with: former Director Charles Donegal, Acting Director Jahan Wallace, John Davis, Glendale Josie, Tiffany Newman, and Kareem Wallace. Madam President, during the previous Davis administration, I also led a team that facilitated the process of formalizing recommendations for the new employment bill, a bill that will be tabled soon in both houses. That work involves stakeholder engagement, consultation, and public education. I commend the Davis administration, and more specifically Minister Pierre Glover Roll, for the political will to take on such an important reform. Madam President, our current substantive employment legislation came into effect in 2002. Since then, the workplace has changed, and the needs of workers have changed. Madam President, just to give greater context, in 2002, many people were still using dial-up internet. I'm sure we all remember having to choose between using the telephone and using the internet. Madam President, in 2002, floppy disks were still familiar. And the phones in our pockets were used to play stake. They were not yet the tools of work, business, and communication that they are today. As a matter of fact, my wife just said to me last week that in addition to us doing more business, in addition to us doing more because of the phones, expectations are more because of the phones. So when we speak about modernizing labor law, we are speaking about modernizing for a different workforce and a different economy. And that is the story of this administration, Madam President. We didn't come to office to stand still. We came to office to move this country forward. The Bahamian people saw the work of the first term, Madam President. Yes. They saw recovery. They saw reform. Yes. They saw progress. Yes. And let me be clear, Madam President, because some people seem not to appreciate and understand. On May 12th, they made a clear and decisive choice. Yes, yes. They went against a reset. They ignored the rhetoric. They chose vision, and they chose progress. Yes. Madam President, that brings me to the area that sits at the center of my present responsibility. Madam President, the strongest bridge between today's challenges and tomorrow's prosperity is education. Let me first acknowledge the presence of the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Science, and Technology, Ms. Lorraine Bristow, who is also in the gallery, and the Director of Education, Mrs. Dominique McCartney-Russell, and the Deputy Director, Ms. Janice Moss.
Can you please stand?
Please.
Yes.
Madam President, all of them and their teams have been a tremendous support to me from day one, and I thank them so much for that. Madam President, most people know me as a lawyer, and that is my qualification. I also proudly now identify as an educator. As a matter of fact, Madam President, I am happy to share that just last month, I graduated again from the University of the Bahamas with my teaching diploma. So while my appointment as Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Science, and Technology may be a surprise to some, I do believe that there is purpose in it. Like the Deputy Prime Minister, Madam President, I too came from the public education system. I attended M.E. Cooper Primary School, I attended Century Lutheran High School, and after I left the Lutheran, I attended the College of the Bahamas. So when I speak about education, I don't do it as an outsider, Madam President. I speak as someone who has been shaped by it. I speak as someone who knows that public education has the power to change a life. Madam President, the Deputy Prime Minister has already laid out the government's direction for education in the Bahamas. He has spoken to technology, equity, special education, teacher support, digital literacy, and national development. My role as Parliamentary Secretary is to help make sure that direction is carried through. Madam President, the public will judge our work by what they see in our schools, in our classrooms, in our schoolyards, in our attendance records, and whether a teacher is present on day one, and in whether a child who needs support actually receives it. That is the work before us, Madam President, and that is the work that I am committed to doing. Madam President, one of the areas that already has made an impression on me is special education. And I want to say this very carefully. Very often we use the word special, but too often society attaches a stigma to that word. In the past few weeks, and especially in attending a graduation at the Exuma School for Exceptional Learning, I have seen firsthand the ability, the progress, and the promise of these young people. And it has strengthened my own view
that rather than simply being referred to as special, they should be seen for exactly what they really are, exceptional. This matters, Madam President, because the way we speak about children helps shape the way we see them. While attending that graduation for the Exuma School for Exceptional Learning, Madam President, I saw 3 young men cross that stage. I saw how far they had come. And I was especially encouraged to learn, Madam President, that all 3 of them were offered full-time jobs in technical and vocational areas after graduation. That is what support can do. That is what belief can do. And Madam President, that is what opportunity can do. So when we speak about exceptional learners, we are speaking about dignity, inclusion, and giving every single child a fair chance. Madam President, as a son of a Lutheran, I can't help but speak about my good family islands. Madam President, educational opportunity must never be determined by where a child lives. A child in Eleuthera matters. A child in Cat Island matters. A child in Exuma matters, in Berry Islands, in Bimini, in Andros, in Abaco. And every single island, on every single key, that child matters. Yes. So, Madam President, in Grand Bahama, that child matters too. That's right. That's right. So, Madam President, the family islands can rest assured of this. They will not be left behind. They have a prime minister from Cat Island. They have a minister of education from Exuma. And now they have a parliamentary secretary from Eleuthera. So long gone are the days, Madam President, when being from a family island means less access, or less exposure, or less opportunity. Progress must be reached on every single island, and education must do it first. Yes. I was especially pleased to attend the graduation of my alma mater, Century Lutheran High School, this year, and to hear from their Member of Parliament and Minister of Works and Family Island Development, Clay Sweeting, that within the next year, both Century Lutheran High School and Preston H. Aubrey High School are expected to benefit from smart classrooms. That is what focused investment can produce, Madam President, and that is what modern education must look like. Because when we speak about smart classrooms, we are also speaking about the future of learning. And Madam President, we cannot speak about the future of learning without speaking about technology. Madam President, technology is now a part of the basic infrastructure of opportunity. And listen to me when I say this carefully. We cannot educate Bahamian children with yesterday's tools and expect them to succeed in tomorrow's economy. We must teach them how to use technology. We must teach them how to use it responsibly. And that means digital literacy, cybersecurity, discipline, and giving teachers the training and support that they need. And Madam President, this is also personal to me because my wife has been a strong advocate in this space through her work in Girls in ICT and through her leadership in cybersecurity. So in this area especially, I know that where I fall short, she will hold me accountable and will help me to continue to advocate with conviction. Madam President, this leads me to the most topical issue over the last few years, artificial intelligence. In July 2025, I published an article titled, Regulating AI in the Bahamas, a Hybrid Approach to Governance. In that article, I argued that the Ministry of Education should play a proactive role in developing AI policy, because the way schools respond to artificial intelligence will shape how future generations engage with this technology. I am pleased to say today, Madam President, that because of the work of the Permanent Secretary and the Director and their team, a comprehensive draft AI policy for the Bahamas education system is expected to be ready for stakeholder review before the end of this summer. And I want to be clear, Madam President. When I speak to stakeholder review, I want to be very clear. That means all of the relevant unions will be notified and will have an opportunity to engage with this policy to ensure that their voice is heard.
That's progress.
This is just one clear sign, Madam President, that we are doing the work now to prepare our education system for the future. Madam President, preparing our education system for the future also means paying close attention to the well-being of our students. I am advised that the Global Health Report 2025 underscores the need for stronger mental health programs for students. And that is now a priority that we must take seriously. And I am pleased to note that the ministry is partnering with the Ministry of Health to support mental health awareness initiatives in our schools. Because a child learns best when that child feels supported, seen, and able to cope. And that is why student well-being has to remain a part of how our schools function every day. Madam President, at the end of the day, all of this depends on people, on the teachers and the school leaders. And it depends on making sure our schools are ready to function as they should. No education system can rise above the strength of its teachers. Teachers are at the front line of this work. And I was taught from young that teaching is not a career, it's a calling. We know that there's a teacher shortage, Madam President. And we know the pressure that this places on schools. As my honorable colleague on the side opposite rightly indicated yesterday, I have been asked by the Deputy Prime Minister to explore every possible avenue to address this issue and to remove any barriers where they exist. And I intend to give it every bit of focus and urgency it requires to prepare for the new school year. And I wish to be clear that this is a matter that requires short and long-term attention. And the ministry is attacking this from all angles. Parents expect schools to be ready in September, Madam President. They expect schools to be open. They expect classrooms to be ready. They expect children to be safe. And they expect learning to begin on time. Those are our immediate priorities, Madam President. But I also recognize that there's a wider task before us, which is to build a culture of learning that continues throughout life. Madam President, education does not end at graduation. Learning must remain lifelong. That is why programs such as Upskill Bahamas are needed. As the Prime Minister also emphasized in his budget contribution, these opportunities will help Bahamians build new skills, strengthen existing ones, and open doors for themselves and their families. For many Bahamians, lifelong learning means a second chance, a new skill, and a better opportunity. I care about this because I have seen what adult learning can do, Madam President. I taught at the Eugene Depuche Law School and was the coordinator for its professional development programs. So I got to see firsthand what happens when adults are given a chance to sharpen their skills, build confidence, and improve their prospects. Madam President, a country that supports lifelong learning is a country that is investing in its people. Madam President, and if we are serious about building a culture of learning throughout life, then we must also be serious about partnership. This budget increases the allocation for education, and of course that is welcome. But we know that the needs across our education system continue throughout the year, across every island and across every level. That is why the approval of the BEST Foundation by Cabinet is so important. The Bahamas Education, Science, and Technology Foundation will help create a clear and transparent way for people and organizations who want to support education and to do so in an organized way. And that support can be directed to areas such as technology, teacher development, support for exceptional learners, and resources for schools. It will connect willing partners to real needs, and it will help to ensure that support can be given in a way that is structured, accountable, and easier to sustain. Madam President, that is also where initiatives such as Adopt a School fit in, because partnership must be practical. It must reach schools in ways that people can see, help to provide resources, meet real needs, and strengthen the connection between schools and the communities around them. And that's in that spirit of partnership, we must continue beyond the classroom as well, Madam President. Because if we are serious about building an education system that serves our people, then we must also be serious about strengthening the institutions that carry our students forward after high school. Madam President, this takes me to our national university, as the honorable member said yesterday. I would like to specifically address a few remarks made by the honorable colleague on the side opposite as he gave his contribution yesterday. The honorable member said, and I quote, "Expenditure of scholarships and support to UB totaled approximately $13.8 million, while expenditure on international scholarships amounted to $12.6 million. This raises an important question. Why are we spending almost the same sending students abroad as we are supporting our national university?" End quote. Madam President, I wish to highlight the actual facts on this matter. The amount allocated in this budget for international students or international scholarships is $14.1 million. the amount allocated for scholarships for the University of the Bahamas is $20 million. Madam President, this reflects almost $6 million more in scholarships to the University of the Bahamas in comparison to international scholarships. Furthermore, Madam President, this doesn't even take into account the fact that this budget increases the amount of scholarships for culinary arts students at the University of the Bahamas by 20%. And I wish to emphasize, Madam President, international scholarships are usually given for areas not provided for by the University of the Bahamas. It was also stated, Madam President, that our national university needs significant investment, and I wholeheartedly agree. What was conveniently omitted, however, was the fact that this budget allocates nearly $44 million in support of the University of the Bahamas. This speaks to the government's continued commitment to the growth and progress of our national university. But what I think we can all agree on, Madam President, is that we need more in order to sustain progress. UB will also need the support of those who actually benefited from it. That is why I encourage us alumni, in whatever amount that we can, to give back. Every contribution counts, and small gifts go a long way. I now wish to address BTVI, Madam President, and I want to make this point very clear. We must move beyond the outdated idea that technical and vocational education is somehow second class. As the Deputy Prime Minister referenced in his contribution, there is a book called The Millionaire Next Door, which reminds us that success and wealth do not always wear the labels people expect. A doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant may move into a neighborhood, and the millionaire next door may very well be a plumber, a contractor, an electrician, or the entrepreneur who mastered a trade and built his own business. That is why technical and vocational education training, or as we call it TVET, deserves respect, investment, and support. And Madam President, I will say this. When I visited BTVI, I heard a phrase that stayed with me. That phrase is, TVET is the new currency. Madam President, that same principle that applies to TVET should apply elsewhere as well. Our education system must also make room for those whose gifts lie in the creative and performing arts. Excellence in education also takes place in the shape of music, in theater, in dance, in visual arts, in performance, in culture, in creativity. Having said that, Madam President, I wish to acknowledge the hard work of President Ian Poitier and his team at the Creative and Performing Arts School. And I also look forward to working close with them. And I'm also excited to attend their school's graduation this coming Sunday. Madam President, as I close, I want to emphasize that this is the kind of education system that we are working to build. One that values every child, respects every gift, and makes room for every pathway to success. There's much work to be done, Madam President, and I come to this assignment ready for that work. So I don't want the Bahamian people to judge us based on intention and effort, Madam President. I want them to judge us based on outcomes. For now, Madam President, and I say this for now, I don't have a constituency. Emphasis on for now. But I do have constituents. They are the teachers who pour into our children every day. They are the students trying to find their place in a changing world. They are the principals, the counselors, the teachers' aides, the librarians, the security officers, the janitors, the clerical staff, and administrators who keep our schools functioning. They are my constituents, Madam President, and I give them this commitment today. I will advocate for them in and outside this chamber. I will listen to them, and I will work with everything I have in me to build an education system worthy of the Bahamian people. Because, Madam President, the future of this country is already sitting in our classrooms. And if we get education right, we get the Bahamas right. And that, Madam President, is why the Bahamian people chose progress. Because they believe in the work we have started, and they believe that we will still build on that progress. So, Madam President, let me make it clear. I support this visionary budget. I support this transformational budget. I support this budget that clearly invests in the future of our country. And I support this budget that builds on progress. Thank you, Madam President.
I'm not finished yet. Take a seat. The chair thanks Senator the Honorable Keenan Johnson for his contribution. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Trevor Johnson.
I'd like to thank the Honorable Senator for his contributions, Madam President, but I wish to address, on a point of order, I might want to wait until after his presentation. He noted that the Ministry of Education...
What is the nature of your point of order?
Misleading. Now, the Ministry of Education only provides scholarships internationally for students, the degrees not offered at the University of the Bahamas. As someone who's applied to several scholarships from the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Education, what they specify is academic priority areas to which they grant international scholarships. And if we take a look at the list on the ministry's website, marine science is an academic priority area offered at the University of the Bahamas. Environmental studies offered at the University of the Bahamas. Criminal justice offered at the University of the Bahamas. Hospitality studies offered at the University of the Bahamas. Engineering, architecture offered at the University of the Bahamas, Madam President. So, Madam President, I know for a fact of students who study degrees internationally on various scholarship programs that are offered at the University of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Senator Trevor Johnson. Senator Keenan Johnson.
Thank
Chair
you, Madam
recognizes you.
President. I just like to reiterate what I said because words do matter. And the Honorable Senator Johnson, Dr. Johnson, so I could separate, Dr. Johnson said, I said that they only provide. I said usually. I chose my words very wisely, Madam President, because I'm aware that they do offer scholarships for programs that are awarded or that are provided for in the University of the Bahamas. But I'm saying that priority for scholarships are usually given to those that are not provided at the University of the Bahamas. And so again, I also ended by saying that I encourage persons to give. I have it right here. I have it right here. If you'd like me to read exactly what I said, right? International scholarships are usually given for areas not provided by the University of the Bahamas. And I invite all of the opposition members who disagree with me to ask for the archives so that they can come and their hands are, yes, please get it. And I'll make sure that if I said only, that I will happily withdraw my statement.
Thank you, Senator Honorable Keenan Johnson. As many? As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Keno Wong. Senator Keno Wong, you have the floor.
Madam President, I rise today with a heart filled with gratitude, humility, and a profound sense of responsibility as I make my first contribution in this Honorable Senate debate for the 2026-2027 budget communication. Madam President, before I address the substance of this budget, I first would like to give thanks to Almighty God for His grace, guidance throughout my journey of life. A scripture that defines my journey comes from 1 Corinthians 15:10. But by the grace of God, I am what I am. My life is a testimony of God's grace and a second chance. Every opportunity to lead, serve, and steward resources is a reminder that I am here by His mercy and for His purpose. I wish to express my sincere gratitude to the Honorable Prime Minister Philip Edward Davis, KCMP, for the confidence he has placed in me, for affording me the opportunity to serve in this honorable chamber, and more importantly, to serve the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I also wish to express sincere congratulations to each of my Senate colleagues on their appointments to this honorable chamber. But in particularly, I would like to congratulate you, Madam President, on being elected as president of this chamber for a now second consecutive term. An equally profound congratulations to the Honorable Senator Jayan Major on her ascension to vice president. Two strong, progressive women leading this chamber, and I love to see it. Now, Madam President, if you permit me, I would like also to extend heartfelt thanks to my beloved, beautiful bride, who is in this honorable chamber. Her name is Efanette Nee Bryce, whose unwavering love, support, sacrifice, encouragement has been a constant source of strength through my life. She has been the one when I was paralyzed to make sure that I bounced back strong. She was there when I was down and out. She was there with me through the ups and downs, and today she's still here. Decent. And if I can permit, my colleague on the side of my left said that she's from the Kingsway Academy. And I believe my colleague on the right of me will also say yay, because that's where he's from as well. Madam President, let me also permit to say today is a very special day in the life of my beloved son, Christopher Wong, who is here in the galley here today, who is celebrating his 21st birthday. God is good. And many of you who know me will know that of his story, that he was also paralyzed in 2024 when he was struck to the head with an 8-pound shot put ball, and God has redeemed him to be here today. I am also grateful for my daughter Sanaya, who is here with me today as well. She just graduated from Temple Christian High School, and I'm happy to have her. Madam President, it will also permit me to please allow me to express how grateful I am for the presence of my mother, Antoinette, who is here with me today. Stand, Mom. My Aunt Donna, my Uncle Tommy, and many members, friends, and supporters who have come here today, especially such as Reverend Dexter Kakula from Evangelistic Temple, Dino Hyla, Dale Carey, Moses Davel, Bridget Ferguson, of course, and during my campaign time, one that kept me on my P's and Q's, none other than Mr. Corrington Burrows. Madam President, their presence reminds me that public service is never the accomplishment of one individual. It is the product of countless sacrifices, prayers, encouragement, and support from those who walk alongside me. Today is a deeply personal moment for me. For many, I am Keno Wong. To some, neighborhood man. For some, Wong. I'm a proud Bahamian whose life has been deeply rooted in service, community, and the rich political history of our nation. I'm a proud graduate of the A. Valley Senior High School, Tiger Nation, many who are watching today, and later continue my education at Kaiser Technology School in Fort Lauderdale. I am the son of Antoinette Stubbs and William Wong Sr. I've been blessed to come from a family whose contribution helped shape the political landscape of modern Bahamas. My political journey began long before I entered political life. I was raised under the guidance of my grandparents, but especially the late Samuel Clarence Stubbs, a man who's dedicated to the advancement of Bahamian people, left an indelible mark on our nation. Alongside his close friend, the late Sir Randall Fox, my grandfather played an important role in helping the Progressive Liberal Party secure its first historic general election victory in 1967. A defining moment in our country's history and turning point in the march toward majority rule and national improvement and empowerment. Growing up, my grandfather introduced me to the first Bahamian Prime Minister, the father of the nation, the late Sir Lyndon O. Pinlan. Those early experiences gave me a first-hand appreciation of leadership, public service, and the tremendous responsibility that comes with representing the people. During the early 80s, I had the privilege as a young man campaigning alongside the late Dr. Bernard Nottage in the Kennedy subdivision, further strengthening my passion for community engagement and public service. Over the years, I have served on numerous committees for the Progressive Liberal Party and remain a loyal and faithful member through victories, defeats, periods of rebuilding, and a time when uncertainty was there. My involvement has always been guided by a belief in the PLP's vision and a desire to contribute meaningfully to the progress and development of our nation. Madam President, today I stand humble and honored to be the first member of my family to serve in the Senate of the Bahamas. This achievement carries even greater significance because I'm proud to be the first Bahamian of Chinese descent to serve in this distinguished chamber. My grandfather came to the Bahamas in the early 40s, and of course, he decided to get involved with a Bahamian woman from Cat Island, specifically Orange Creek, Cat Island, to the late Maud Newbold, the great Cat Island. He couldn't go back. My journey reflects the very best of what the Bahamas represent. A nation where people of different backgrounds, cultures, and traditions can come together as one people under one flag, united by a common purpose and a shared belief in opportunities. Madam President, as many of my colleagues have stated, on May 12, 2026, the Bahamian people spoke clearly and decisively. They chose progress. Yes. They chose continuity. They chose leadership. They choose hope over uncertainty and confidence over doubt by returning the Progressive Liberal Party to governance. Yes. And as I can say it, 33-8. The people voted for continued investment in communities, families, young people, and the future of our nation. I had the privilege of being a part of that historic journey as the Progressive Liberal Party standard bearer for the constituency of St. Anne's. And let me say to all of the residents of St. Anne's, thank you for your support, thank you for your love, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to be in your homes and in your communities. Although I now serve in this honorable Senate, my commitment remains firmly rooted in the communities of St. Anne's and throughout the Bahamas. I will continue to be present in our neighborhoods, listening to residents, supporting community initiatives, and helping to build stronger and safer communities wherever I can. Madam President, this budget demonstrates a government that understands an important truth. Strong economic and economies are built upon strong communities. Yes. No nation can prosper if its communities are struggling. No economy can reach its full potential if citizens do not feel safe. Yes. No society can flourish if young people lose hope. This theme of this budget communication is a budget that is built on progress. Yes. That is a fitting theme for this moment in our nation history because real progress belongs to every Bahamian. Real progress is measured solely by statistics, economic reports, or fiscal indicators. Real progress is measured by the experience of ordinary Bahamian families. Communities measure progress when their children have access to quality education, like my colleague said earlier, meaningful employment opportunities. Communities measure progress when seniors feel supported, respected, and valued. The late Nelson Mandela once observed that a society is judged by how it treats its elderly citizens. My colleague, the Minister for Social Service, has indicated today in her correspondence that we will continue to make sure that our elderly citizens are taken care of. By that measure, we must continue striving to ensure that our seniors live with dignity and security. Communities measure progress when neighborhoods experience greater safety and see a visible law enforcement presence. Community measure progress when families can achieve the dream of home ownership and build generational health and wealth. Communities measure progress when valuable citizens receive the assistance they need, not merely to survive, but to thrive. Madam President, it is at the very heart of these objectives that community initiatives such as urban renewal play a critical role. With that being said, I pay my attention to urban renewal. Urban renewal advocates for the measurable and meaningful change. It focuses not on promises, but on results. Not rhetoric, but on real improvements in the lives of Bahamian people. The Bahamas government understands that we are not building a budget simply for the next fiscal year. We are laying foundations for generations to come. This is why I welcome the continued investment in programs that directly improve the quality of life for ordinary Bahamians. Yes. One of the most impactful initiatives has been the minor repair program, formerly known as the Small Home Repairs Program. Over the past 5 years, approximately $11 million in home repairs are being completed through our country. For many families, a repaired roof means protection from storms. Structural repairs mean safety. Improved sanitation facilities mean dignity. These are not merely construction projects. They are investment in Bahamian people and families. I am equally encouraged by efforts to address long-standing sanitation challenges through initiatives aimed at expanding indoor plumbing and improving living conditions for valuable families. Too many citizens still live without many of us consider basic necessities. But I believe in this progressive Liberal Party government that we will continue to empower our people, that they will live with the essential needs every day. The provisions of indoor plumbing and access to running water may seem ordinary to some, but for families who have not spent years, for some families who have spent years carrying water home from the public pumps, these improvements represent life-changing progress. Yep. When a family receives running water for the first time, that is more than a government project. It is compassion translated into action. Similarly, initiatives aimed at improving accessibility for elderly, disabled residents deserve our full support. There are far too many Bahamians who face challenges simply entering our lives, leaving their homes. The provisions of ramps, railings, bathroom modification, and accessibility improves, restores independence, safety, dignity to some of our most vulnerable citizens. When an elderly resident can safely navigate their home without assistance, when a person living with a disability can enter their home independently, this is not merely infrastructure. This is a government demonstrating that it understands the value and worth of every citizen. As the Right Honorable Algin Allen once said, the most test of government is how that government treats those who are in the dawn of life, their children, those who are in the twilight of life, the elderly, and those who are in the shadow of life, the sick, the needy, and the disabled. Madam President, those words should guide us all. A budget that builds on progress must be a budget that lifts people, strengthens communities, protects families, and creates opportunities. This is why investment in community development, neighborhood revitalization, housing improvements, social intervention programs, and family support initiatives are not expenditures. They are investment in the future of our nation. Madam President, I now turn my attention to community safety, crime prevention, and the work being undertaken through urban renewal, the Ministry of National Security, community-based organizations through our country. The government crime prevention strategies embraces what has become known as the whole of a government society approach. This government strategy recognizes that crime fighting cannot be left solely to the police. It requires the participation of government, communities, churches, educators, parents, businesses, and ordinary citizens like you and I. The strategy is to build up 5 critical pillars: prevention, police detection, prosecution, punishment, rehabilitation. These pillars represent a balanced, comprehensive approach to public safety. The first pillar is prevention, because stopping crime before it occurs will always be more effective than responding after lives have been damaged. Madam President, If we are serious about reducing crime, then we must be equally serious about investing in prevention. This government is all about prevention. The most cost-effective investment in public safety is preventing crime from occurring in the first place. Yes. Every dollar spent on early intervention, youth development, family support, and community engagement produces returns that no amount of enforcement spending can replicate after a young person has been entered into the criminal justice system. This government understands that reality, and that understanding is reflected through this budget. One example is Helping Young People Excel program, better known as HYPE, which continues to serve as one of the government's flagship early intervention initiatives. This program represents a collaborative effort involving the ministry responsible for education, health and wellness, and social services, and focusing identifying and supporting at-risk youth before they become involved in criminal activity. Madam President, I welcome the continued investment of $160,000 in this program because every young person redirected toward education, employment, and personal development represent a victory for our country. I'm also pleased to see the allocation of $700,000 for community centers throughout the Bahamas. And I trust that one day, St. Anne's will also get a community center. These facilities are far more than buildings. They are a hub for major opportunities. Yes. They provide safe spaces for mentorship, soft skills training, after-school programs, community in activities, and social interventions in communities where they are most needed. For many young people, the community centers become a place where they discover purpose, discipline, and positive role models. Madam President, I also support the continued investment of $300,000 in the Defense Force Rangers program. I dare to say just a few short weeks ago, I had the opportunity as the PDF president of Temple High School to take a grade 12 students there to see the work that the Royal Bahamas Defense Force is doing so they can have a great appreciation of what is going on at our Defense Force. This program introduced young people to leadership, discipline, teamwork, accountability, and mentorship through a structured environment that promises and promotes positive character development. The lessons learned through discipline and service often become a foundation for future success in education, employment, and community leadership. Equally important is the National Youth Guard program, which has been allocated $1.5 million to train our young people, our young Bahamians between the ages of 18 and 25, while strengthening our country's disaster preparedness and national resilience. This is something that we must continue to encourage our young people to be involved with. These young people are not only receiving practical skills and training, they are learning the value of service to country. Madam President, prevention must also include strengthening families. One initiative that deserves recognition is the Grow Your Child program, which allows incarcerated parents to maintain meaningful relationship with their children. Research constantly demonstrates that strong families connection reduce repeated behavior and improve outcomes for children. When we help preserve healthy families' relationship, we are not simply assisting one individual. We are interrupting cycles that can otherwise pass from one generation to the next. Yes, yes. Madam President, I also welcome the completion of the Nation First dedicated 28-bed female juvenile facility. This is a significant step towards forward in modernization of our juvenile system. Can you imagine young female offenders requiring special intervention, support service, counseling, education, and rehabilitation opportunities that recognize their unique circumstances and needs? Ensuring that juveniles are no longer housed alongside adult offenders reflects a justice system that values rehabilitation, protection, and the possibility of redemption.
Yes, that's it.
These initiatives demonstrate that this government cares and understands an important principle. Crime prevention begin long before a police officer responds to an incident. It begins in our homes. It begins in our churches. It begins in our schools. It begins in our community centers. It begins through mentorship. It begins through great opportunities. But, Madam Speaker, it begins with us. And it begins by ensuring that young people have a reason to believe that their future can be brighter than their present circumstances. The second pillar focuses on effective policing and detective through intelligence-led operation, modern technology, CCTV system, ballistic tracking, anti-gang initiatives, and targeted enforcement against legal firearms and narcotics trafficking. The third pillar ensures that those who break the law face a swift and effective prosecution. The fourth pillar ensures appropriate punishment and accountability for criminal conduct. And the fifth pillar recognizes an equally important truth, that rehabilitation and integration are essential if we are serious about reducing repeated offenses and breaking cycles of criminal behavior.
That's it.
Madam President, I strongly support the Royal Bahamas Police Force, the officers, and every member. I specifically thank the officers in the Fox Hill police community who continually patrol the St. Anne's community every day, every morning, every night to keep our communities safe in St. Anne's. I thank them. But the Royal Bahamas Police Force clear, hold, and build strategy. This approach removes criminal elements from troubled communities, maintains a law enforcement presence to prevent their return, then rebuilds those communities through infrastructure improvements, social programs, employment opportunities, and community partnerships. This strategy recognizes the sustainability public safety is achieved not only through enforcement, but through great opportunities. I also commend the school policing unit, which places trained police officers in our junior school and senior schools to provide early intervention, mentorship, behavioral guidance, and support for our young people before they become involved in gangs or criminal activities. Prevention belongs and begins long before a young person enters the criminal justice system. Prevention begins in our homes, like I said earlier, our schools, our communities, and our churches. Madam President, I wish to speak specifically about something that is very special and dear in my heart, the National Neighborhood Crime Watch Council and the critical role that community-based organizations play in safety. As the former chairman of the Bahamas National Neighborhood Watch Council, served from 2019 to 2024, I have witnessed firsthand the extraordinary impact that organized communities can have in reducing crime, strengthening communities, and fostering civic pride. The Neighborhood Watch program groups serve as the eyes and ears and heart of their communities. There are countless dedicated men and women that serve over 168 neighborhood watch groups, specifically here in New Providence, Grand Bahama, Eleuthera, Abaco, and Exuma, and many other islands that are involved. These dedicated volunteers strengthen relationships between residents and law enforcement, identify emerging concerns, encourage civic responsibilities, and create environments where criminal activities becomes increasingly difficult to operate. I continue to encourage these community leaders to continue to foster their relationship with the Ministry of National Security to fully get the full support that is deserved. I therefore welcome continued investment in community leadership development, volunteer training, public awareness campaigns, capacity building initiatives, and engagement programs that strengthen these grassroots organizations through our nation. We realize when we have safer communities, we have a better country. Madam President, another critical component of this government strategy, it is a commitment to youth development. Programs such as HYPE, helping young people, the Smart Start program, BTVI scholarship opportunities, vocational training initiative, mentorship programs, and community youth engagement projects provide positive alternatives for young people who may otherwise be vulnerable to negative influence. These initiatives create pathways to success. They provide hope, they provide skills, they provide purpose, and they provide opportunities. Equally importantly are the Second Chance program. Madam President, I had the greatest opportunity to be a part of the Fox Foundation Legacy of Leaders, which theme was the power of second chance. From setback to comeback.
That's it.
Where I was the keynote speaker.
That's right.
Where 18 men were honored, including myself, on Saturday, June 20th at Bahamas Convention Ballroom. This was a defining point that this government, along with Fox Foundation, that I believe, my personal opinion, that we are in a country where our government believes in second chances. And I am a product of a second chance.
That's right.
Madam President, I am reminded that your setback is not the end.
No.
It may be the start of your comeback.
That's it.
Too often, individuals who have made mistakes and find themselves permanently defined by those mistakes. This administration understands that true public safety requires rehabilitation. Through mentorship, skills development, educational opportunities, counseling, job replacement assistance, and integration support, we can help develop individuals become productive citizens and contributors to our society. I have been a part of a Second Chance program that is a part of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, and I've seen where young men and young women have become better citizens over the past 5 years. This is a program that truly do believe in giving our young people a second chance. Madam President, every dollar invested in prevention today saves countless dollars in law enforcement, incarceration, social service, and human suffering tomorrow. More importantly, every life redirected toward purpose represents a victory for an entire family, a community, and a nation. As we debate this budget, let us remember that behind every line item is a Bahamian family seeking great opportunities. A young person searching for direction, a community leader seeking resources, a parent seeking hope, and a nation seeking progress. This budget reflects a government that understands that national security is not solely about protecting borders and enforcing laws. National security is also about empowering citizens. It is about strengthening families. It is about supporting communities. It is about creating opportunities, and it is about investing in our people.
Yes.
Madam President, I support this budget because it reflects a vision for a safer, stronger, and more prosperous Bahamas. It invests in our communities. It invests in prevention. It invests in youth, and it invests in second chances like me. But most importantly, it invests in Bahamian people. Madam President, as I include my first contribution in this honorable Senate, I reaffirm my commitment to serve with integrity, humility, dedication, and purpose. I recognize the legacy of those who came before me. I honor the sacrifice they made this moment possible. And I embrace the responsibility that now rests upon my shoulders. With that, Madam President, I fully support the 2026-27 national budget, a budget that builds on progress. It is with persistence, determination, and diligence that this government budget will progress. May God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. May God continue to bless the Progressive Liberal Party. And may God continue to guide the work of this honorable Senate. Yes. Thank you, Madam President.
Yes.
Thank you for your contribution, Senator the Honorable Keno Wong. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Robin Lines. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Wayne Monroe.
Madam President, I stand to move that the Senate at this point to suspend business to tomorrow, Wednesday, the 24th of June at 10 a.m.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the business, can I do this? It has been moved and seconded that the business of the Senate shall suspend until tomorrow, the 24th of June at 10 a.m. As many as in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay, just as strong. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. The business of the Senate stands suspended until Wednesday, the 24th of June at 10 a.m.